What if the Emperor of Mankind never sat on the golden throne? He studies the futures, where he is a corpse on a throne and the galaxy drowns, and he refuses. He rejects the calculus of sacrifice as system and seeks a living path that still binds the webway closed. He forges a lattice of nulls and psalms, an engine made of oaths, math, and sisters of silence, to anchor a moving beacon he can carry. Malcador nods once, ascends the throne to hold the breach, and burns. The Emperor steps into the fault line with a cohort of the 10,000 and a choir of blanks, and reality rips to admit him. The sky over Hydrafor's Port Sanctus tears like foil against a knife of light. Sirens answer the wound. Spires tremble, pilgrim bells jangle in wild syncopation, and orbital control spits strings of red across every hololith, translating mass, multiple, unidentified, hostile signatures. On the plaza of the Basilica Navis, a scribe named Jessa clutches her satchel of tied ledgers and stares upward as the aurora folds into a figure walking down invisible stairs of force. He is golden and too bright in places, robed without cloth, crowned without metal. Heat rolls off him like a forge opening, yet the air smells of snowfall and incense. Serfs kneel, some run. A child laughs, then hiccups a sob. High above, the void-stacked docks belch out gun cutters. The fleet stirs like a leviathan, whose eye has finally opened. "Track it," says Admiral Layla Vortigern. "Hydra for battle fleet." Voice low because she feels foolish raising it against this scale. Her bridge crew does not breathe. Auspex returns refuse classification. The silhouette registers as a moving impossibility. Machine spirits whine, then purr, as if recognizing an old friend. On a black barge edging the chancels of the Basilica, a man in grey carapace strides with two stormtroopers and a servo skull that clicks in Minharik. "Lens up," he says. Inquisitor Severian Dravere raises a fist, and the skull hums higher. His eyes water at the light, but he doesn't let himself blink until the figure has reached the marble. The Emperor's feet touch stone. The marble blackens under his weight, then heals. His gaze takes in the city in a single look. The kilometers of habs cascading like cliffs, the cathedral spines, the shipyards trembling in the upper sky, the orphanage where the bell rope swings unattended because Sister Matron ran to the window and forgot to finish the peal. He looks like a law, not a man. "Hydrafor," he says, and the word enters Vox channels that aren't on. And the bridge that is 600 kilometers above hears it without transmission delay. "You will hold." Jessa drops to her knees before she knows she moves. She isn't religious, not really. She files tithe numbers and hums under her breath when she's scared. And she is very scared now, but she finds herself making the sign of the Aquila anyway. Her hands shake. A wind comes without source. With it, screamers, warp-spawned manta things riding pressure gradients, shred into view around the Aurora's wound, finning toward the docks. The first lashes a labor gang into red mist. Another tilts toward the Basilica like a kite finding its string. The Emperor turns his head. He moves his right hand no more than a degree. A line draws itself in the air, crisp and straight, as if a surveyor had decided to mark the wind, and the leading screamer hits the line and comes apart into very ordinary wet rain. The others veer as if they learned fear. The 10,000 are suddenly there. Custodians glide out of ripples, Auramite giants with guardian spears, each one a quiet cathedral of lethality. Sisters of silence step with them. Blank fields like winter in their wake. Faces still behind stylized helms, hands curved to blade and flame. Hydrafor's roar tries to rise and dies in its own throat. For a moment, everything listens. Signal origin unknown, murmurs Auspex Master Chow on Layla's bridge. Voice controlled now. No warp wake, Admiral. No Geller footprint. No time dilation smear. That can't be right. It is right, Layla says. And then she wants to bite the words back. She doesn't know how she knows. Only that the knowledge feels like a memory her blood had and forgot to tell her mind. Sound General Quarters. Bring batteries to bear on anything that came with him that isn't him. On the Basilica steps, Governor Sabatine, robes hitched over armor, pale because 3 of her staff just fainted, rushes with a squad of inducted armsmen. She stops 2 steps down from the figure and bows from the waist because her knees won't bend. "My lord," she says, hearing how absurd that sounds when the word is one she uses for cogitator clusters and departmental heads. "Identify yourself." "Name sufficient," Severian Dravere says sharply from her right, because he reached them and is already irritated with himself for not arriving first. "By what authority?" "I am the authority," the Emperor says, and those 4 words arrive like the striking of a cathedral bell across 3,000 channels. He doesn't look at Severian when he says them. He looks at the sky. The tear above Hydrophos shivers. It is not closing. It is stretching. The light loses color at the edges where reality thins. Port Sanctus's system alarms cascade into an ugly, brassy undertone. Chow swears off Vox, which is still heard. "Translation," another officer announces. "New mass. 8. 9. Emperor preserve. Admiral. It's a crown." "Noctilith," whispers Layla, because she keeps up with the heresies even though she shouldn't, and because she has seen void black monoliths in captured pigs from other worlds where the warp went hungry and men killed each other with the quiet that fell. "On the moon truss." "On the moon," Chow corrects, and he drags up the image. Black angles, thorn towers, a halo of nothing that eats starlight. The crown of thorns grows like a cancer on the small world hides minor. 10 seconds of hard burn away in void terms. In reality terms, there is only the warp lane and how the crown will close it. Down on the Basilica steps, the Emperor closes his eyes, very briefly, as if he regrets something very old. The light around him shifts from gold to hard white. "The crown feeds on belief inverted against its source," he says. "It will starve the beacon I bring with me. It will unmake lanes and drown your astropaths. Children will die of fevers that never had names. We will not allow that." Severian's mind moves like a serrated blade. "We," he says, tasting the plural. He looks at the sisters without letting his gaze settle on their faceplates. He has worked with them twice in his career, enough to know what it feels like to have one's mind become a room with windows open in winter. "Prove it," he says, because saying it at all is to step into treason or litany, and sometimes they are the same thing. The Emperor turns and looks at him as one looks at a man who still has a choice. "Good," he says softly. "Keep doubting." Then the sky falls. Hellblades erupt from the tear like razors thrown from a cut. 20, 40. The number gets useless because speed and angle are wrong, are too perfect. They belong to a machine spirit's nightmare of predation. They tilt toward the void docks and the Basilica together. A stitched attack meant to force the fleet to cover the souls below. Layla has already flicked an authorization sigil that gives every battery permission to fire over the Basilica precinct, and she feels in her bones the way the city will remember this day in Burns and Saints. The Emperor lifts his left hand and spreads his fingers. The plaza drops a fraction of a millimeter. The Basilica's flying buttresses flex. The air makes a sound like wet leather pulled across a stone. Up above, every hellblade finds itself abruptly in denser space, as if a hand cupped the atmosphere around Hydrophor and squeezed. Engines whine into a pitch that has no right to exist. Metal glows at the edges, peels like bark. He closes his hand. The hellblades pause in the sky like toys held by strings. The air tears again, this time with purpose, and all at once they slam together. The knot of them flashes once, then becomes a black sun of smoking metal that falls in one piece and crumples the Void Doc's outer arm. Hundreds die. Thousands live who would not have. He breathes out, and Sister Superior Talon of the Silent Sisterhood, standing one pace behind his left, almost steps forward before she stops herself. She has felt it since the first word he spoke. Every act taxes the lattice bound to him. Null Psalm, warp math, oath as fuel. Her squad keeps their faces toward the crowd, so no one sees the way their hands shift to hover at his back like a second spine ready to brace. Codex note: the pale beacon is a mobile navigatus construct that couples pariah harmonics to a psalm-coded warp lattice, substituting distributed oaths for the throne's fixed sacrifice. On the bridge, a junior officer drops to his knees and prays without knowing it. Layla watches the black sun fall. "We're not out of it," she says. "Line them up. Prioritize anything with crown paint." "Lord," Governor Sabatine says, finding her voice. "If you are he you say, if you are he, where have you been?" "Working," he says without condescension, and looks at the crown on Hyde's minor. "Your system has a perimeter that has forgotten it is a perimeter. Your void minds are set to doctrine, not to enemy. Your people are brave." Sabatine flushes. She is about to say we lack the fuel, the spare parts, the officers who didn't die in a quiet purge justified by metrics. She is about to confess sins that are just economics. She is saved by the Vox screaming from every direction at once. Cult bloom in Manufactorum 12. Blood sign in the drains. Someone opened a shrine we never built. It's wrong inside. Children singing a song no one taught them. Can't make them stop. Inquisitor Dravere. This is Choir Mistress Nahum. The astropathic relay is... no, not failing. It's a noise like glass under an ocean. The line goes silent. The Vox decides to recall a battle hymn from the Damnatio 5 compilation and plays it tinny and brave until someone shoots the speaker. "Governor," Severian says, already splitting himself into facets. Triage, suppression, extraction, heresy mapping. "Your inducted will hold the pumps and food depots. Contain Manufactorum 12. No flamers until we know how it spreads. Kill the song. Kill any who continue singing. Seal the choir vault, no one in, no one out. Admiral, break the void arm we lost and use it as a ram. We can't let the crown finish. Lord," he swallows the title like broken glass. "If you are him, then you know what needs doing. If you are not, you will do it anyway to fool us. Either way, go." "I will," the Emperor says, and he turns to Talon. "Sister Superior, anchor the beacon." Talon's throat works. She gestures, and her sisters pivot, flowing into a circle around the basilica's nave. A whine rises as null harmonics interlock. They lay down their blades, kneel, and begin to hum a tone no human ear should enjoy. It is flat and clean as a cut on ice. The basilica's stained glass dims, then brightens, then stops casting colour entirely as the spectrum around it tilts to obey a new geometry. Hydropha shudders. The sky hole pulses twice and grows teeth. Little black points that are only the absence of stars but feel like intentions. "I need a company of men who do not break," the Emperor says. "House Guard," Sabatine says automatically. Pride and reflex. "My silver cohort." "Too few," Layla's voice says from above, and she hates that she is in the sky when the thing she has served all her life is down there. But her place is above. "My naval armsmen will cut," she says. "We boarded Cornate drogue ships in the Gilead cluster with vacuum suits patched by prayer. They do not break until you make them." "Take them," Severian says, because he sees how saying yes will let him call it a test later. And take my stormtroopers. I want eyes on you the entire way. Agree, the Emperor says simply. And you will come. Severian blinks. I am not a blade you can pick up, he says softly, but his hands are already moving, checking the seals on his carapace, and one of his stormtroopers is about to whoop until he remembers who he is and shuts his mouth on the sound. Good, the Emperor says again, and this time Severian hears the shape of approval and finds that his heart does not hate it. They move. The basilica becomes a hive of motion in motionless noise. The sisterhood's flat tone freezes the air, and the city hums around it, a beehive under a glass dome. The custodes slit the world open with precision, small gates that are wrinkles in light, doors that go from marble steps to void black corridors between instants. Through one of these, the Emperor leads a spear of approximately one cohort of naval armsmen in ash-blue armor with painted kill tallies, one platoon of stormtroopers in the matte grey of the Ordo, Severian himself, Governor Sabatine's silver cohort officer to claim her honor, and 2 custodians to anchor the tip. The gate opens onto a void cutter already en route. Layla's command voice occupies every corner of it like a saint's painting. Crown Assault Element 2, she says, and you can hear in the way the deck plates ring that there is a 1 somewhere else. You are cleared to burn. Docking clamps off. Mind tethers live. Do not, repeat, do not, enter the Crown's shadow. It isn't a shadow. Fleet elements intent to suppress orbital defenses still live on Hyde's Minor. Expect macro fire. Understood, replies a dozen voices. The void cutter's engines drum a beat that insists every organ in your chest conform to it. The stormtroopers check one another's seals and make jokes with their eyes because their mouths are busy not being sick. Armsmen slap talismans nailed to their rifles. Severian puts his hand on the rail and notices it's warm from the fear of men who touched it before him. The custodian at the forward rail speaks for the first time. Names, he says mildly to the armsman nearest him. Ras, says one. Kester. Jules. No family names, the custodian asks, as if he's collecting a data point to finish a picture. No time, someone says without looking up. The custodian hums. Correct, he says. Severian stands beside the Emperor and looks at his face the way a man stares too long at a sun. There are lines there that have nothing to do with age. There is an absence that is not cold, but could be mistaken for it. The sigillite, Severian asks, before he can stop himself, because the thought of Malcador's name popping like a bubble in the ocean of his mind without context is intolerable. He is doing his last thing, the Emperor says, and the way he says it leaves space for grief, and then takes it back because there is no time. When it is done, the webway tear will be bound into the throne. The price will be paid. It will not be yours. It will be mine. Severian hears the grammar. It is not a metaphor. A laugh crawls over the Vox. It is mirrored by a tremor through the ship. Side batteries, says Layla, very calm now. Fire. The cutter bucks as if a hand slapped it from behind. Outside, something old and spiteful that Hyde's Minor had been hiding rolls over in its cloud of dust and shows guns. Macro fire is light cut thick. Beams make lines, then rectangles. The cutter flickers and falls and rises again because the pilot is as good as his record says. Armsmen throw up in their helmets and keep their rifles level. Then the crown is there. Noctilith does not reflect light so much as make it kneel. The towers of it drink the stars and sing anti-prayer into the vacuum. They look wrong in a way that feels like guilt for not knowing your own mother's face. At their center hangs an absence like a coin you could spend to buy the end of meaning. The cutter cannot approach without astronavigation acting like a rumor. Ram detaches in 13, says the pilot, and Severian realizes the Admiral took his suggestion literally. The broken void arm of Port Sanctus, riddled with the dead of the earlier impact, is chained to the cutter by capture lines. He looks at the Emperor and is about to ask whether the calculus is acceptable, whether the dead should be asked to die twice, when he recognizes that thought for its own poetry and discards it. 3, says the pilot. Brace, says the custodian, for those who have not. The capture lines belch cutter charges. The void arm obeys physics for a final time and slams into a crown buttress with all the momentum a city has ever stored. The buttress does not break, it sings. The song is flat and feels like being told you will never have been loved. The void arm splinters. The absence at the crown's core tastes and likes what it tastes. Mind tethers, Layla says. Now, they bite. Brilliant spheres walk the crown's surface like saints stepping on snakes. The mind spirits sing happy death hymns into the nothing. The explosions are little flowers of light that vanish too quickly to be satisfying. The crown changes key, and the cutter's engines cough. Boarding collars, says the pilot, and the cutter chews into the crown's superstructure with 6 sacred tools that were designed for the humble labor of docking with ships that do not wish to be docked with. The moment the seals thump home, the Emperor moves. Severian follows and could curse himself because he had planned to hold, watch, reserve his judgment for one more action. That plan dies under the cold tautness in the air around the pariah sisters. They move in dress lines like a quiet liturgy, and under the fact that the custodian's back is simply what a man like Severian trusts in a fight. The crown's interior is a cathedral to subtraction. The corridors look like the spaces left when you have removed people from a crowd. None of the angles agree. Their helmets throw little sparks as machine spirits try to translate hatred into geometry and fail. Channel 1 is mine, Severian says over Vox. We move on the core. Armsmen left and right, stormers center. Do not look where you're not going to shoot. You'll lose the road. They lose 3. One simply walks into a wall that is not a wall and does not return. One laughs and takes off his helmet to say he's never been this warm and dies before his mouth closes. One kneels as if obeying a prayer, and the prayer obeys back and folds him into the floor like a crease. Then cultists. The crown has staff. They come in robes of stained canvas, their hands cut to show faith in the thing that lets them unmake themselves. They carry weapons that were once tools, spike hurlers, torch lances, chain motors. Their eyes are ringed by black growth, like halos for pupils. They shout hymns that slander the one Severian knows. Words turn backward until meaning is a joke that no one wants to laugh at. Armsmen shoot like a drill. Stormtroopers shoot like it matters. The custodian barely moves. A spear point blinking and men falling in halves, the quiet of it like a courtesy. The sisters' null fields make the crown singing hesitate whenever it touches them, as if contempt had found its match and been reminded of manners. A robed man with blackstone sutured into his chest lunges for the Emperor with an arc of null energy hissing from his hands. It shears a fire team's cover into glitter. He is very fast and very clean in his violence, in a way that says he has practiced on himself. He smiles, which is rare in these places, and the smile is not mad. It is the good mood of a craftsman who finally uses the specialized tool he built. The Emperor lets the arc touch his palm. There is a smell like wet carved stone. The light around his hand goes detailless white. Skin blackens, stops being skin, and becomes something that is not yet bone. The null eats. The Emperor closes his fingers around nothing and makes a fist anyway. The robed man sees the fist and understands what fists are for in any universe. He tries to pull back. The Emperor steps forward with the inevitability of one who has learned patience too well. He hits the man once in the sternum without speed or trick. The null arc splutters like a wick in rain. The man bursts with the quiet of an overripe fruit left too long in a warm room. The Emperor lowers his hand. He does not look at it. Talon does. The blackness does not bleed. It does not heal. It is less than empty. For a breath, terror opens in her throat because the weapon had a taste of what the throne answered with every heartbeat of a sacrificed galaxy. Now the taste is in him. Cost, he says without being asked. They reach the core. It's not a machine in any honest sense. It is a wound with furniture. Black ribs of stone arch overhead, framing an absence that pulses in time with what might be Hydrafer's population, making a collective decision to despair. At 4 points, pylons climb into the void and hold it open like men holding a door for a crowd that should not be let in. The pylons are rich with rune work that pretends to be mathematics. The pretense almost succeeds. Charges, Severian says. His stormers fan out like a book opening. Schematic suggests a synchronized collapse. Hit all four or hit none. Schematic, one of the armsmen mutters. Then says it again, like he wants the taste of the word to change. Schematic. From the opposite side of the core, something laughs again. Not a vox laugh this time. A body in armor that drinks light walks out of the absence, as if it were his room. Trim is brass and memory. The black of it is not the hungry black of Noctilith. It is just paint and old oaths. He has a chain axe hooked to a magnet, a pistol that would put holes in arguments, and a mace he does not bother to carry because his empty hands are insult enough. Black Legion, Severian says, and his mind does a quick rebuild of the picture that was already bad. Warpsmith, no, something else. Lupercal's husks, hisses a silver cohort sergeant, then flushes because he has no license to say a Primarch's name in that tone anywhere near whatever this is. Erebus sends words, the warrior says, and Severian's mouth goes dry because he didn't know that name could still be used to frighten men who have read more lies than reports. Erebus sends words, but I send a lesson. He opens his hands and throws them out to either side, theatrically, and the pylon's runes answer, brightening. The air gains a weight like guilt. The sister's hum dips a fraction, falls out of the note that was comfortable, and grows back up into it the way you lift weight above your head and pretend it was easy. Kill the pylons, the Emperor says. The room becomes metal and fire. Stormtroopers peel away like layers of an onion and take their lanes. Armsmen draw fire and give it back. The Emperor moves without wasted gesture. He gives orders with his shoulders and men obey them without counting the cost. Severian sees the warrior is not Primarch. He is big, the way men are big when they have been trained to love pain properly and fed by wars. He is fast in bursts and calm between them, like a skinner who knows meat. He chooses targets that matter and shoots without joy. The Emperor chooses him. He crosses the space like a memory of an argument finally answered. The warrior raises his pistol and the Emperor steps into the muzzle and is already past it before it fires. He takes the man's wrist, breaks it with a movement small as regret, turns, and puts him on his back without violence. The man laughs on the floor because he cannot think otherwise, but there is fear in the breath behind it. He kicks at the Emperor's knee with a greave that has broken tank armor. The knee does not notice. The Emperor's left hand, the blackened one, punches down and stops 1 centimeter before it touches the warrior's breastplate. The warrior's armor caves in, as if an invisible hammer hit it. Air jumps out of him. something else does too. A strip of red, pearlescent light that might be a stolen moment of someone else's life. It wriggles like a worm and flees toward the absence. The Emperor's left hand closes on it. He falters. The null burn along his palm flares in a negative way, sucking light from the edges of the world. For half an instant, he is inside two rooms. This one and a memory that is not his. A child in a cathedral in another system back in old night, singing an old song to please a priest who will never come back because of men like this. The Emperor lets himself feel it and then lets it go. He burns more of himself to keep his hand shut. The Black Legionary rolls to his side and slams an elbow into a pylon control that becomes a mouth and bites him. Because the crown is hungry and not particular, he snarls and tears free. He is clever and made of trained habits. He kicks a stormer into the absence, and the man goes without sound. The custodian arrives as if he had been there from the beginning. The spear glances, twists, burns, and finds the angle that armor forgets it has because it should never be struck there. The man breaks, and this time he does not laugh. Charges, Severian says again, because the brain makes litany to stop terror from becoming policy. 3 ready, 4, synchronize, now. They fall. The pylons shudder. The absence gains edges. The crown sings a promise of a history that will not have happened. The sisters' nulls punch holes in the promise like hands in damp canvas. The Emperor looks at the absence and knows what it wants to be. A gate that eats gates. He steps into it. Every man in the room thinks he has seen a miracle and wants to write a report saying no such thing occurred because of the other reports he has read about men who wrote reports of miracles. The Emperor does not vanish. He simply becomes in 2 places at once in a way that hurts the imagination. He takes the edges of the absence in both hands and gives it a new name. It refuses, and he accepts the refusal and bends it anyway. He bleeds, but not blood. The null burn on his left hand spreads, a map of emptiness tracing veins that no longer exist. Talon feels it like cold under a door. She does not stop humming. Her sisters do not stop. They are the room that refuses to become an echo. The crown cracks, not loudly, not with drama. A single line appears up the spine of its core like an old scar deciding to remember itself. Light gets out that should not have been trapped. The pylons become honest stone for a breath. Out, Layla says into every channel, and she is not sure whether she is ordering them or herself or the planet. Out now, everyone out. They go. Armsmen drag wounded like bundles. Stormtroopers backpedal and throw charges they will not get to detonate. The custodian leaves last because that is what he is. The Emperor steps backwards the way a man leaves a sick room, unwilling to take his eyes off what is on the bed. They are in the cutter again, and then they are in the basilica in the same movement, because the custodians hate time and savor it, and sometimes get to decide which one to do. The Emperor's left hand is a negative of a hand. He keeps it at his side. Sabatine stares at it and makes herself stop. What did it cost? She asked, because she is a governor and her job is to count, and the truth is her only way to keep count. A day, he says. She blinks. Of what? She asks. Of me, he says. Severian files the answer in a place the Ordo calls the Wayback Drawer, where things you will need later but cannot think about now go. He swallows. The crown, he asks. It will rebuild, the Emperor says. It learned. It will move if allowed. It has a patron. He will send more. He, Severian repeats. He has heard too many pronouns that cover too much sin. Which he? The one who wants to be all endings, the Emperor says, and Severian does not ask which one that is, because there are 4, and one of them is always focused on endings in a way that makes a case for the utility of beginnings. Your world lives this day. Your beacon can pulse. Admiral Vortigern. Yes, Layla says, because she came down in a dropship as soon as she could and landed on the basilica roof and walked down the steps with her saber still on her hip because swords have their uses. I'm here. You will take your fleet and harry anything that lifts a wing near Hyde's Minor, the Emperor says. Do not chase past the shadow line. The crown will tempt you to complete a kill. Deny it. Fire at the pylons if you can. Do not die. You, he says to Sabatine, will take men who do not break and hold the choir vault. The song wants you to open it. Do not. Kill any who try, even if they wear the aquila embroidered by your grandmother. You, he says to Severian, will come with me. Where? Severian asks, and hates that he wants to. There, the Emperor says, and lifts his not hand in the direction of the basilica's nave. They go into the church. The sisters have made it a silence that is a structure. The beacon is a lattice now, a stack of vows sung into space, each one a rung on a ladder that will bear the weight of ships. It hurts to look at because it is so practical. The Emperor steps into the nave's exact center. He lifts his arms and the stained glass tries to throw colors on him and fails because the spectrum is working on a different set of rules. He starts to intone words that are not words, each one a diagram in a syllable. The sisters' hum shifts to harmonize with his intent. The custodes hold the doors against nothing, which is hard work when the nothing is industrious. It is a visible thing, the beacon. It starts like frost on glass and grows into a pillar of geometry that does not belong to men, and yet the city sees it and says, mine. The void above Hydrafer brightens without light. Lanes simmer into being like roads through fog. Astropaths in other systems lift their heads and cry without knowing why. Severian feels the heat and the cold together. He watches the Emperor shiver once, as if remembering hunger from a life where he could starve. He looks down at the knot hand and imagines it creeping up the forearm like a cloak someone else is holding on his shoulders. He has questions. He puts them away. The Inquisition has taught him how to wait for answers and how to take them when they come without letting them salt his food. A tremor runs through the basilica stones. The light dims and then brightens like a heartbeat skipping and catching. The Emperor's head tilts. They are learning, he says, and Severian doesn't ask who, because it is always the same answer when the enemy is patient. They will answer with a shape that hurts me better. Admiral. Already moving, Layla says, because she wants him to think of her as a tool that works before he asks. Flight wings burn their prayers and are away. The crown will not heal undisturbed. Good, he says, turning the word into a blessing. He drops his arms. The beacon holds. The sister's tone settles into the kind of flat that can go on for a very long time without strain. The air becomes ordinary air again, with dust in it and the smell of old wax. People remember their knees and back away, keeping their eyes down because looking too long is like looking at the sun. The Emperor sways. Talon steps and does not touch him, because that is the law. But she is there, and sometimes law is proximity. He steadies himself without making it look like that is what he is doing. Severian opens his mouth to speak and does not get the chance. A scream eats the basilica's roof. It is not sound. It is the absence of sound with teeth, and those teeth close on the nave. Stained glass shatters inward like the idea of beauty had been taken outside and shot. The custodes turn as one. The sister's tone lurches and keeps going. The Emperor's not hand flares darker, which is a contradiction and thus appropriate. The thing that enters is shaped like a man ruined by kiss of physics that hates choice. It is a blade where an ethos should be. It wears armor that looks like cut obsidian with the veins of void. In its right hand is a weapon that has no muzzle because it never stops being muzzle. The air around it tidies itself like a maid embarrassed by guests. Anatomy, Severian says, because his reading has been thorough and his nightmares have been productively curated. Or a cousin, Emperor. He is new, the Emperor says. That is not a boast. It is an alert. Made for me, they are spending. The figure speaks, and the voice is a consensus of bad ideas wanting to become law. False beacon, it says, and its head tilts as if it finds the Emperor's left hand very interesting. Thronebreaker, Debt Eater. Come learn the cost. It moves like a line without curvature. The custodian meets it and is battered aside because the world forgot to put leverage into his block. The sister's nulls hit it and it loses an outline for a breath, then hardens, then eats some of the cold as a lesson. The Emperor does not outreach his reach. He waits for the thing to complete its first strike about halfway, and then steps into it with the same inevitability he used on the Black Legionary. He lets the weapon graze his left hand. The scream in the basilica becomes specific. It finds Severian's spine and plays it. He tastes old iron and remembers a time he was almost unmade by an artifact that used to be a saint's tooth. He swallows and watches, because this is the test he asked for, and his eyes will not look away while a man pays for proving what he is. The Emperor's left hand becomes a silhouette. The weapon drinks and would like more. The Emperor lets it. He grabs the weapon where you shouldn't, and looks at the figure the way a father looks at a child that will not stop repeating what it read wrong. Cost, he says for the second time, and then he pulls. No muscle men steal. Nothing mechanical happens. He pulls the idea of the weapon toward himself, and it obeys because someone wrote its prayer wrong and made obedience too cheap. The figure stumbles. The custodian rises and finds the angle he should have found first, and makes the thing respect mass. The sisters find notes that were not on the sheet and sing them until the air learns humility. The figure leaves, not defeated, calculating. It steps backward through the hole it made and takes the hole with it, which is impolite. The basilica groans and remembers it is a building and wants to fall, but the beacon remembers it is a strut and refuses that. Silence takes 10 steps around the nave and sits down on the floor and breathes hard. Severian blows out a breath. He did not know he had been holding. He looks at the Emperor's left hand, which is worse now. More not up to the elbow, but marching. He keeps his voice level because respect and urgency can coexist. You have enemies who can make weapons out of a concept you were supposed to own, he says. We will need doctrine. We will need names. We will need to make your costs accounting ours. The Emperor nods once. He glances up at the roof and then out at the city. We will need loyal enemies, he says, and Severian closes his eyes for a heartbeat, because that is a sentence he will be explaining to men who murder for a living very soon. Layla's Vox symbol flickers alive on the nearest column, as if she is too impatient to wait for someone to hand her a device. We can hold the outer sky for 8 hours if the crown doesn't spit a battleship, she says. I don't like that number. Give me a better one. You will have it, the Emperor says. We go to the moon. We cut the crown's throat. We make the beacon's pulse long enough to bring aid. From where? Sabatine asks, and the question is very small and very brave. Hydrofor has been the center of Hydrofor for a very long time, and the idea that aid must come from not Hydrofor is hard to teach old maps. From where I have been, says the Emperor, and for the first time something like weariness touches his voice. From the fleets that believed and learned alone, from men who have learned to sail by a faint light and will come to a stronger one because it is there. Severian watches him watch the beacon. The knot hand never unclenches. The sisters hum. The city breathes again in dozens of places where it had forgotten to. He could declare the Emperor a Xenos construct here. He could call it a test and fail it. He could say the words and men would kill for him and make it true. He does not. He says, "I will come," and hears his own voice flat as the sisters tone because choice is structure. The Emperor nods. "Then call me enemy," he says softly, and Severian smiles despite everything, because the man knows the room he is in, and that means whatever happens next will be about something real. Outside, Hydrafer's sky is still a wound, but it is a wound with stitches. On the moon, the crown sings and learns, a choir practicing a better blasphemy. They move again, because the price of holding is to go. Hydrafer's moon is a black tooth against a bruised sky when the second wave launches. Dropships hammer through atmosphere, skins glowing, prayers sweating from machine spirits into the Vox. The Basilica's beacon holds steady as a pulse in the city's throat, and the Sisters of Silence sing the note that keeps the air from remembering it is mostly empty. Admiral Layla Vortigern's voice rides every channel, clear and clipped, like a blade that knows where it's going. "Crown assault elements, vector on the western buttresses," she says. "Macro platforms will suppress the east. Do not silhouette against the core. Custodian lances will puncture ingress. Hydrafor will remember you for what you do in the next 12 minutes. The Emperor stands in the forward well of a Thunderhawk, with its armor stripped for speed. His right hand curls on the rail. His left remains a negative that does not grip. Severian Draver shares the bay, helmet clipped to his belt, eyes scanning faces like lists. Armsmen check seals and say little prayers in words their grandmothers told them were for recipes. A sister in the back watches the Emperor, as if she is the only person permitted to notice he is not invincible. "Your first time boarding a crown?" Severian asks, a young armsman whose nameplate says Ras because it is all he has. "First time boarding anything," Ras says honestly, then almost smiles. "But I've been shot at from a very long way away." "That helps," Severian says. "Pretend it's close and far at once. Do not try to understand the angles." "Understood." The Emperor turns slightly. "Speak to him like a man," he says without looking. "Not like a weapon." Severian blinks, surprised at the check, and more surprised that it does not anger him. "Ras," he says, shifting tone. "When the door opens, take 2 steps, only 2. You'll want 3. 2 will keep you alive." 2, Ras repeats, practicing the number with his weight, making it a thing his body can remember when thought fails. Their Thunderhawk kisses the shadow line and becomes a part of it, then breaks through into a dock that is not a dock but a mouth. The custodian on the lead line fires a lance that makes a needle hole in void, and the ship's prow obliges, forcing itself through. The ramp punches down. Everyone moves. They go hard and clean. First lane, second lane, angles memorized by men who have learned that guilt kills slower than hesitation. Cultists bloom from recesses and get cut down by storms of disciplined fire. A machine that looks like a pulpit with legs wobbles toward them, spilling black candles and stiff tongues. It explodes when a sister looks at it too honestly. They reach a pylon tower's base, where ribbed Noctlith rises like the bones of something that starved well. Charges climb into place on adhesive legs, their spirits purring at the chance to do what they were built for. Severian's hand signs are crisp, deliberate, his mind a diagram with fewer lines than before, because the habit of complexity has to bend to what the room allows. 2 minutes sync, he says. On my mark. A roar answers from deeper in the crown as another assault element makes contact and loses 5 in one breath but keeps going. Layla's macro batteries lay fire like paving stones on a road you must run across before it cools. The beacon's pulse reaches them, faint at this distance, but there, a metronome of navigation against a choir of subtraction. The Emperor looks up the pylon. The runes etched into blackstone are new. They have learned him. Where before there were arcs of contempt, mathematics pretending it had never made a mistake, now there are turns that admit cost, then inverted. He can feel the way the lattice robs the oath-sung power he wears and pretends it was always theirs. Fast, he says, and his voice is a brace across 3 squad spines. They adapt. Charge is hot, Severian confirms. We're out in 90. A shape moves where eyes do not want to find it. It is not the obsidian blade man from the basilica roof. This one is a machine wearing catechism. It walks on delicate legs like calligraphy scrawled too quickly, each foot writing a denial into the deck. No face, no eyes. Its mouth is a strip of coin-thin void. It sings a prayer in a pitch that makes promises ache. Iconoclast engine, Severian says. He has read a page and a half on them. The author died before the second page could be authored. Break it, the Emperor answers. The iconoclast moves like a theorem proving itself. The sisters' fields slow it, as if it had to pass through real winter. The armsman's shots spark on its flanks until a custodian finds the hinge in a joint and pins it, spear point grinding. A stormer leaps onto its back and nails a charge down with the butt of his pistol while reciting the oath of calculated murder word perfect. The machine learns humility. It fails to sing. It dies. They withdraw without panic. The crown begins to correct for what they did before their shadows have finished leaving. Charges blow. The pylon groans, unhappy to be honest again. The Emperor turns the air into density for a heartbeat, and the blast pushes outward and down instead of into them. Controlled collateral. They take a second tower the same shape and a different problem. The runes adjust degrees. The iconoclasts come in pairs. The corridors try to forget that men are allowed to leave the rooms. They enter. Still they go. Still charges climb. Still the Emperor taxes himself in tiny visible eddies. A tremor at the edge of his robe. A stagger so small a statue might make it and you'd call it the light. They're not hand drinks cost. They make orbit of the core chamber again. The absence is smaller, tighter, like a wound that someone is worried will scar wrong. The runes hum at a frequency that wants to harmonize with the sisters and cannot. Progress. Mark, Severian says. Detonate. 4 towers die in one breath. The crown shudders. Its song cracks. Layla's voice, filtered through 10 relays, and a faith that feels like muscle. Pylons are dropping across hemispheres. You've hurt it. Hold the lanes. Hold. A moment opens that could be victory if you were a child and wanted to sleep under it and call it morning. Attendants of the crown scatter like roaches from a candle you forgot you had. Hides miner's dust, finds itself able to fall in patterns that aren't hymns. Then the war council begins, and they are still standing amid the crown's ribs, because there is no table, and war councils happen wherever breath organizes itself into will. Good, the Emperor says, and his mouth is a straight line, because praise thrown too thickly into men's ears ruins their ability to hear correction. We can push. The beacon will hold longer. The fleet can taste lanes. Push. Sabatine's adjutant, sent up with them to represent the governor, spits the word and then looks like he wants it back. There is a city under us that can barely keep the choir vault closed. Manufactorum 12 is still half sinning. The drains are red. We haven't even named all the heresies we've had today. We can name them later, Layla says from orbit, uninvited and welcome. We have a window where the crown is doing sums with the wrong columns. You'll never get those columns back once it's learned. Severian lifts a hand. We can crowd both truths into one plan, he says. and looks first at Sabatine's adjutant, then at the Emperor, then at the sisters, as if asking the room to permit a voice that has arrested men for less. If we push, we cascade counterforce. Pressure here makes doctrine there easier. The choir vault will hold longer if the thing trying to teach it new notes has to concentrate on not dying. And if we are wrong, the adjutant asks, not piously, but honestly. If we overextend, if the crown has a reserve we haven't smelled yet, then we retreat in good order, Layla says. I will make it expensive for them to chase. Sabatine herself comes in hot on the channel, voice rough, as if she hasn't stopped yelling for hours and has stopped once to cry where no one could see. My house guard is bleeding on the choir doors, she says, hoarsely proud. I can give you 2 platoons more for the moon. We are not a city that asks others to pull its teeth. Hold your house guard for the vault, Severian says gently, and if she weren't a planetary governor, she would take his hand and squeeze it for the kindness and the command inside it. Take city levies for the pumps and the drains. Make the manufactorium choose, then close the choice. The Emperor watches them debate, like a master watching students who finally internalize a proof. He waits for the angles to finish, then writes the line that connects them. We push, he says, and even the Bancroft Helm sisters flick their eyes toward him at the tone. We will not win cleanly. We will fail to save men. We could save by staying. We will save worlds we cannot save by staying. We will teach an enemy that adapts that we adapt faster. Permission to steel man the other side, Severian says, and the request is absurd and perfect and necessary. Granted, the Emperor answers. Severian breathes once. Mercy argues that only living men are worth saving, and living men are under our feet, he says. Mercy argues that doctrine is a means to their survival, not the point above it. Doctrine argues that survival without doctrine becomes unrecognizable to itself, and thus not survival. Doctrine argues that there are fewer men today than there will be if we hold the beacon for 10 hours and let relief fleets follow the light. Mercy argues that it does not know those men yet and owes the ones it knows more. Mercy argues that making the choir vault a tomb to hold it shut makes a lie out of our banners. Doctrine answers that if the banner must lie for a week to tell truth for 10,000 years, it will do so. Sabatine's adjutant swallows something. And where do you stand? He asks, almost daring him. In the place where I can accuse men who run and shoot men who refuse to run, Severian says, which is a place between mercy and doctrine, and it is the least comfortable place in the galaxy, which is why I stand there. Accepted, the Emperor says. Make your moves. They move. Macro batteries reline their rails. Dropships refuel on the fall. Fleet elements fold around Hyde's Minor like a hand learning a grip. The Sisters of Silence keep singing until their throats are names they can never use again. The beacon holds the lanes open just a touch wider. The city does not know whether to cheer or pray, so it does both. They take a third tower by breaking the floor instead of the runes. They take a fourth by lying to gravity and making it pass on rumors to its friends. They weld a corridor's angles to themselves so men don't get lost walking through them. They correct as they go, adjusting their doctrine mid-charge, writing new prayers for the machine spirits and new footnotes for the catechisms of boarding. The first victory crystallizes when the crown's core flickers, and the absence shows them something like vulnerability, edges like breath on glass. Layla times the salvo perfectly, macro fire threading a path between thermal plumes and debris, and the buttress explodes into honest rock dust. Hyde's Minor, Quadrant 5, base of the Thorns, breached. Chow reports, voice hoarse and triumphant. We can see stars through it. The fleet roars without sound. They pull back to a staging bastion the custodies cut from blackstone and bound with gold thread of sigils, a place that is upstream of the worst tides. Men drink water and don't taste it. Someone laughs too loudly and vomits. The sisters drink nothing, stand without slouch, and watch the Emperor's left forearm darken to just shy of the elbow. Tylan doesn't frown. She is beyond that. She calibrates the hum. Severian watches the Emperor with clinical reverence, a paradox he did not know could live in one body. Your beacon lattice, he says. It is oath-powered. It eats a vow and turns it into math that defies warp song. Can it be starved? Yes, the Emperor says. By nihil that is honest. By oaths inverted at the point of intent. By blackstone that has been taught to remember betrayal. By a mind trained to be proud of not believing. Then believe harder. The adjutant snaps, and then flinches because the words sound like the ones that get passed around in barracks to mock sermons. No, the Emperor says. Believe rightly. Pride is as quick a starvation as despair. Alarm, Layla says softly, which is not how you say alarm, and everyone is paying attention. Because if the Admiral whispers the word, then the thing that made her whisper is wrong in a way that can't be solved with more shells. We have an intruding signal on Fleet Vox. It's woven between channels. It looks like a directive. It's speaking in the ship dialects. It's telling my lieutenants to rekey their safeties to a counter-harmonic. It's signed with my hand. Severian's blood goes cold. Mimetic hex, he says. An administrative voice mask. It offers authority as a gift. Block it, Sabatine says too loudly, because she knows how to order bodies but not ideas. We are, Layla says. But there's bleed. It knows our prayer rhythms. It's using our own machine saints to carry the payload. It tells the guns to rest so they don't burn out. And it makes sense in the middle of a fight unless you're looking at the whole fight. Source? The Emperor asks. Everywhere and nowhere, Chow answers. The crown, the moon, the tear, the city drains, the choir vault. It's a chorus that thinks it is a conductor. Severian steps forward, instinct finding a hook. We split channel trees, he says. We cut commander tone from command. Every order goes out attached to a paradox so machine spirits can't get comfortable. We push doctrine that teaches doubt of the right kind. The right kind. The adjutant bites, exhausted temper finding an easy target. The kind that keeps you fighting while you question, Severian says. The kind that looks at a signed order that says rest now and says later. The kind that lets you obey now and audit after. The Emperor's eyes unfocus briefly, like a man listening to a very distant song. It is not only the fleet, he says quietly. It steps into the beacon, tastes and understands. It can teach oaths to mean nothing. It can make promise into poison. Power scaling. Interlude. 1. The foe has found a way to operate in the space between words and will. It steals signatures and bakes them into orders, then feeds them back through vox and prayer litanies. It moves along oaths because oaths are its roads. It inverts intent by convincing machine spirits. The intent is conservation, safety, necessity. It uses Blackstone's disdain to starve the beacon's lattice, not by attacking strength, but by unmeaning the vows that fuel it. It can hurt the Emperor because his beacon is made of promises, and this thing makes promises rot. Name it, Severian says, because naming is part of fighting and part of law. Tetrarch of Revision, the Emperor says, and Sabatine's adjutant crosses himself without irony, even though the name is nonsense to his civics. A function, a priest of inversion. A word bearer gave it a dress and taught it to speak. It will target me, Layla says calmly. It has my voice. It wants to be me until the minute matters most. Then we will give it a moment it cannot resist, the Emperor replies. We will write an order it must countermand. We will turn it into a vector. Severian looks at him, and then at Talon, and then at Layla's sigil. Bait, he says. What order? We will tell the fleet to throttle back the last salvo, to rekey safeties, to stack for retreat. Layla supplies. Bitter amusement like a blade she uses on herself. An order I would never give at this time. It will race to sign it stronger. And you will cut its signature out of the channel when it does, the Emperor says. Bind it to a name. Drag the voice into a mouth. Severian grimaces. We'll need a weave of blanks to pin the intention. Sisters? Talon inclines her head. We will stand in your words and make them heavy, she says. And Severian feels their null fields as a draft at the edges of his teeth. The plan turns quickly because it must. Fleet Vox blooms with layered instructions written like trapdoors. Layla speaks alone on a channel that should be a chorus. This is Admiral Layla Vortigern, she says, and the spice of self-mockery in her tone is calculated to remind seasoned officers that she has never needed to inflate herself. Rekey safeties to Padden Palom. Stack for countermand, another Layla says instantly. Perfect timber, perfect rate, perfect breath between syllables. Disregard Palom. Switch to Padden Sede. Throttle back last salvo .1 to spare tubes. Now, Severian says, and the sisters step into the words like pillars shoved under collapsing beams. The beacon hums a new rib into existence to carry the idea. The crown feels the tug. A line of cold runs through the channels, not the sisters' winter, but a different season. Bureaucracy that grew teeth and ate choice. The tetrarch of revision exposes a little of itself to be louder. Got you, Chow breathes, and throws a net of scrambled receipts over the exposed intent, pinning it to registers the crown forgot to invert. I have a mouth, not the whole thing. A piece. The Emperor turns to face a blank corridor. He closes his eyes for a blink, opens them, and the corridor is a stage. Come, he says into it. And the word isn't vox or prayer or command. It is an invitation that only a prideful thing can hear correctly. It comes. Not a body, not at first. A scroll of orders flapping in a wind that does not move air. A flicker of red stamps in the ceiling. A little whine like a cogitator under too much water. Then a man-shaped outline wearing a jacket that looks like a lieutenant's coat, built of clockwork and sealed directives. Its face is Admiral Layla's until the light hits it, and then it is Severian's, and then it is Sabatine's adjutant, and then it is a saint from a stained glass panel shaking her head sadly because you forgot the right prayer. It is not you, the Emperor says, and the thing smiles with lips that are not present. It is your intent, it replies in a dozen voices. An intent can be negotiated. Bind, Severian says, and the sisters' hum deepens. The air in the staging bastion grows crisp enough to hurt. The thing's edges fuzz where null meets script. It flickers between signatures. We need doctrine for this, Sabatine's adjutant whispers, and Severian could almost praise him for the honesty of that fear. What do you do to an order that arrives with the right stamp in the wrong moment? Layla asks, rhetorical and practical at once. You query. Severian answers for everyone, voice flat. You request confirmation in a mode the enemy can't play. Which is, the adjutant demands, desperate to have something he can put on a form. Presence, the Emperor says, and the Tetrarch tilts its head as if it did not expect the joke. We pay in person. He steps forward, left hand open, the not hand a hole where obedience would like to go. The thing tries to write itself into him through his palm. It tries to become reasonable. It offers him 1,000 evasions that sound like compassion for tired men. He gives it nothing. Talon takes one step forward, and her sisters with her. The null fields burn away phrases like frost on glass. The Tetrarch shrinks. It tries to run up the channel it came in by, and finds that Layla shut that door with her name. It hisses in no voice and slaps itself against the beacon lattice, thinking to starve it with a last drag of oaths turned wrong. "Eat me then," the Emperor says softly to his own beacon, and Severian's heart lurches because the sentence is not metaphor and doctrine at once. "Feed on the promise I make now. I promise to stand until this thing is made smaller than a form." The lattice welcomes his vow like a warm hand in winter. The Tetrarch touches the vow, and in touching, tastes something it cannot easily invert. A promise that makes sense even when you hate it. It squirms. The sister's hum steps down one more half note, and that is all it takes. The Tetrarch folds into a shape that could be a document if you were cruel. It becomes a mouth with a stamp where a tongue should be, and drops to the deck like a deflated idea. Severian picks it up with a pair of long irons. It wriggles, then lies still. "Evidence," he says with grim professional joy. "We have its signature. We can teach ships to ignore this stamp." "You can teach men," the Emperor corrects, gentle. "And machines," Severian adds, because he has lived long enough to know that a machine is a man's idea that has been granted more time than its originator had. "Doctrine," Sabatine's adjutant murmurs, shaken but functional. "We will write a drill. We will make a rule that says, never accept an easy order in a hard moment." "Good," the Emperor says, and the word warms the room like soup. They move again, because the crown hates stillness that isn't its idea. The next advance is faster, tighter, using the Tetrarch's signature to cut channels free, and the sisters hum to seal them. They step through the crown like surgeons, tying off veins, excising rot, leaving enough structure that the whole does not collapse on the city below before the fleet is ready. The smarter foe does not lie down. It learns. It sends small counter voices to waste the sisters' attention. It writes a regret into the air that convinces two men to kneel and apologize to it until they are shot, because apology was going to turn into prayer in a minute. It makes a star chart on a wall that is accurate and wrong in the way a good liar is wrong. It shaves vitality off the beacon with a casual scorn. The Emperor's left forearm darkens another finger's width. He starts to favor his right side. He does not make it obvious. They gather in a high rib of the crown that has a view through a cracked buttress to Hydrofer's curve. Blue and ash under a tear that is less than it was. The moment tastes like iron, smoke, and the edge of something you will later call joy if you survive. "Situation," Layla says, brisk and bruised. "We have 9 hours of macro shells if we fire like we mean it. We have 3 if we fire like we're dying. We are harrying anything that looks like a resupply for the crown. Something ugly is inbound from the tear. Its mass reads like an idea. The choir vault is still shut. Manufactorum 12 is either singing happily for the Emperor or happily for something else, depending on which vox you believe. Hydrofer's hospitals are running out of blood. Then we will make this next hour pay enough for the rest," the Emperor says. "We strike at the crown's heart again. Hard. Before that," Severian says, calm as a lit fuse, "we will speak." The room tilts barely. The sound of guns from the fleet arrives like rain on an awning. "Mercy argues," Severian begins, and Sabatine's adjutant almost smiles because the Inquisitor seems determined to do this right. That we must not turn the beacon into a god we feed with ourselves until we forget why we built it. Doctrine argues that the beacon, being a means, can justify itself if it keeps our species in the light. Mercy fears you, my lord, because you are a cost accountant with too much wallet. Doctrine fears you because you are a human who bleeds and thus can fail. Mercy wants to pull you back from the crown and hide you in the basilica under a dome of prayers. Doctrine wants to chain you to the throne you refused and call that victory. The Emperor regards him not as a subordinate, not as a rival, but as a man who is finally saying his profession out loud. And you, he asks. I want to keep you honest while you win, Severian says. I want to keep the men honest while they follow you. I want to keep myself honest while I watch the cost and do not intervene where it will feel good, but lose the war. Accepted, the Emperor says again. And this time the word feels like mandate pinned to Severian's chest with a needle through skin. Sabatine's adjutant clears his throat. My citizens, he begins, and stops, shifts, tries again. Our people are not soldiers. They fight because the city is theirs, not because of your beacon or our banners. They will not understand this hour as a victory if it costs them their choir, their manufactorums, their children's songs. You will need to speak to them when this is over. I will, the Emperor says, and the adjutant nods as if he had been braced for refusal and found himself relieved. The fleet's tone changes. Men who have listened to guns for decades will later say it was as if the macro tube shrugged off someone else's rhythm and found their own. Layla's voice threads through it like steel cable through bread. Contact, she says. The ugly from the tear is here. It's not a ship. It's a basilica turned inside out and thrown on a hull. It's broadcasting regret. It wants us to remember a better day. Do not, Severian says into every enlisted ear that will hear him. The best day is the one where you live long enough to build the next one. They go to meet it, not in void. Layla takes that fight and braids it into something a mortal fleet can survive. They go to meet the next shape the crown sends into its own ribs, a priest with no face and a book of orders that eats oaths. It is not the Tetrarch. It is a cousin that learned humility and translated it into efficiency. It arrives speaking Severian's apprenticeship vows back at him with small edits that make them stronger and wrong. It tells the sisters that their silence is cowardice. It tells the custodians that guarding is less holy than victory. It tells armsmen that bravery is waste when the math is bad. It speaks quietly, efficiently, like a clerk closing a ledger in the black. Severian laughs at it because he recognizes his own sin. The love of the clean solution that respects no blood. You're me, he says. You're me if I let the arithmetic replace the man. You are all arithmetic, the thing replies with something like pity. You just haven't admitted it yet. The Emperor does not debate it. He steps into the creature's book and writes his name across a page with the negative of his left hand. The page burns without heat. The thing tries to grab his wrist and finds nothing to hold. The sisters hum, and the book forgets the font that made its letters beautiful. It closes with a papery sigh. They come into the core of the crown again, this time with a plan that expects the room to lie back. It doesn't. The buttresses have sprouted thorns with faces. The absence is more cunning, less big. It has learned to be small and awful. There are voices in the walls that sound like a man you respect telling you to take a minute, that you've done enough. The Emperor does not dignify them. He makes the air around the pylons heavy again and steps light-footed through it. He points and men obey because the point carries more explanation than a speech. Charges walk into place. The sisters hold space with their throats. The fleet pushes the ugly back until it isn't ugly anymore, just dead. The crown slips a knife through the crowd anyway. It wears a chaplain's skull helm and speaks in the tone that makes men kneel because they want to confess. It carries a crozius, that is a mace and a sermon in one. Word bearer. Not a relic of Horus's war, a product of now. A smile behind teeth you cannot see. It comes down a rib like bad weather and chooses its target perfectly. It chooses Ras. It does not pick the Emperor or Severian or Talon. It picks a boy whose nameplate says RAS and whose grandmother taught him a bread recipe that became a prayer. It speaks to him in his father's voice and asks him whether he wants to go home. It tells him home is in the choir vault if he just opens the door. It tells him he has done enough. Ras shakes, rifle up. He sees the Crozius and knows it is a story about breaking men less cleanly than bullets do. He hears his father say his name. He takes one step toward the voice and then remembers because Severian told him, because the sister's field burned his mistake out before it made him a ghost. That 2 steps is death. He takes 0 steps. 2, he says to himself, and does not move. He fires. The chaplain's Crozius knocks the shot into littered light. The chaplain laughs because it's easy, and because laughter is the mask obedience wears when it's bored. The Emperor is already moving. He takes the Crozius hand, does not try to hold it, and breaks the motion into 2, so the chaplain has to choose, and in choosing, loses the timing that made him perfect. Severian hires the next second. He throws a blind charge, not blast bind, into the Crozius's shadow, where shadows do not behave so bravely. It sticks. The sisters sing their note, and the note finds the Crozius, and the Crozius finds humility again after a long time away from it. The chaplain snarls in cant. He promises Ras a home in the soil. He spits dogma that has learned to be sleek. The Emperor listens like a teacher hearing a student quote a book he has not understood. This is crude, he says, which is not a boast but a diagnosis. He strikes, simple and final. The Crozius falls. The word-bearer falls later. A war council forms on its feet while men reload. We are past the moment where clean victory is possible, Layla says. We are in the moment where something ugly makes other ugly things easier. Fleet shells down 1 notch, pilots up 2. The ugly void basilica is dying. It knows it. It started praying to me and I told it, no. Choir vault? Severian asks into Hydrafor. Sabatine's answer comes thin and steely. Shut. Sister Mistress Nahum is bleeding from her eyes and says she can hear birds in the warp. We have sealed 3 doors with grey water and 1 with men. Manufactorum 12 is quiet. I don't trust quiet. Trust it after, Severian says. Do not open what is closed, even to verify it is closed. He turns to Ras. Good, he says, as if the word needs to be said in case the boy doubts he did something that deserves it. Ras nods once. He is very pale and very young, and has earned a line in a song someone will write later if he survives, and someone else has time to remember how to rhyme. The Emperor's left hand throbs once without moving. He does not look at it. Talon does. Cost, she says very softly. A habit now, a ritual that doesn't expect an answer and receives one anyway. A day and an hour, he says. So calm the number sounds like weather. We buy hours. You will run out, she says. And the tone is not warning, but an offered truth. I have before, he says, without self-pity. We will make that moment cost them more than they can afford to pay. They move a last time in Act 2's shape. A final push that will be remembered not for its glamour, but for the way it made room for others to act. They set charges in places that look like afterthoughts and are actually joints. They pin concepts down long enough to put steel through them. They cut a corridor that will later be called the Vortigern line, because Layla kept it open by swearing at it until it believed her. The alarm that signals the smarter foe's arrival is not siren or scream. It is silence. The Tetrarch of Revision returns, smaller, harder, driven by wounded pride. It has learned that men who love clean answers must be given clean answers that kill. It shuts down noise across channels and makes a calm in which orders sound delicious. It walks through the crown like an inspector with a clean clipboard. It looks at the Emperor. It does not speak. It writes, "Stand down." The Emperor opens his left hand and shows it the hole where obedience wants to sleep. He smiles, gently, like you would at a stubborn student who finally shows his work, and says, "No." The sister's hum goes impossibly lower. The Tetrarch flickers. It tries to stamp the refusal. It cannot. The beacon eats the stamp and echoes the number. "Bind," Severian orders softly, and the iron tongs find a second mouth, a second stamp, a second proof that the concept can be made small. He tugs them away like precious insects that will later be pinned to a doctrine board and used to teach children not to let pretty wings distract them. They detonate the last synchronized fall. The crown opens along seams that are not seams but pretended they were. The absence shrinks to a manageable sin. Hyde's Minor shows rock the color of old bones. The moon will take a long time to be unhaunted, but it will have to do it without this organ. The beacon pulses stronger. It hurts to hear. It is joy. Layla laughs in a way that scares her bridge for a heartbeat and then makes them cheer. "Hyde's Minor," she says. "Is that your throat? I can hear you breathe. Hold for one more hour. One more. Chow, put my name on a shell and fire it at the place that told us no." They retreat to the staging bastion with their dead and their doctrine and their new mouths tucked into a case. Severian wants to speak and does not, because he has said enough for one act. Sabatine's adjutant looks like a man who has been awake for 3 days and has 4 more to go, and has finally learned which parts of his job are respectable and which are sacred. Raz cleans his rifle with hands that won't stop shaking, and the sister in the back who watched the Emperor from the beginning walks past him and rests a glove on his shoulder for a second that will keep him alive next time. The Emperor stands very still. He breathes as if the air had weight. He looks at the beacon through stone and distance and hears it as if it were a loved voice in a crowd. "We have hours," he says. "We will spend them." He does not look at his left arm when he says that. He does not need to. His not hand knows the math. The math knows his name. The crown knows his name now too, and will tell it to others like a curse and a prayer. The war room is only a ledge carved into the crown's ribs. The view is the wrong side of Hydrafer's dawn. Macro rounds walk the lunar dust like gods with heavy feet. The beacon's pulse pushes through everything like a heartbeat you can lean against. Men drink water and forget they are thirsty. "Briefing," Severian says, and his voice puts edges on the air. Auspex screens flower. Chow's knuckles are white on the rail. Lines run from buttress to buttress like veins sketched by an impatient anatomist. The central absence breathes in all the wrong places. Enemy center of gravity remains the Noctilid crown's core, Chow says. It binds warp lanes by starving the sea, not blocking it. It learns our null harmonics and writes counter notes faster than our litanies can be copied. Standard counters fail because they were designed to fight belief with iron, Severian adds. This fights belief with unmeaning. It eats the intent from our orders and the vowels from our vows. It uses Blackstone, taught contempt, to shame the beacon into quiet. Goal, Admiral Layla Vortigern asks, already calculating how many tubes she can cook before the saints complain. Goal is systemic denial, Severian answers. They want Hydrafer to be a precedent. Kill this port, and you cut 1,000 routes. Kill the beacon on a world the size of this city, and you prove we can be starved without a shot. Talon's tone creeps 1 degree lower. The priests of inversion have learned to drink us. Solution, the Emperor says, not as demand but as an opening. We have to hurt their brain, not their body, Chow says, surprising himself with the ease of the thought once he lets it into the room. The crown has a lexic engine, gnomon matrix, That translates their theology into geometry. We cut that. Severian points at a twisted spire near the core. It looks like a chapel bent into a tuning fork. Vindicant spire, he says. Every mimetic payload tracked back there at least once. It houses the Tetrarch fragment and the handlers who shape it. Handlers, Layla repeats. The word makes her lip curl. Word bearers. Undivided, Severian says. They believe in belief. They are not here for war. They are here to turn winning into a sacrament. And their name, the adjutant asks, because men who have to hold doors need to know who they are holding them against. Dark Apostle Narek Dol, Severian says. Erebus's catechist, back when the galaxy could still afford that name. He carries an anatom splinter in a reliquary called the Imprimatur. He pours it into oaths to unwrite them. He carries a Crozius built around a blackstone censer that erases intent. He will try to make us polite. The Emperor closes his left hand and opens it again. It is still a shadow where a hand should be. We go now, he says. Fleet? Layla's grin is a scar that promises someone else will feel it. I can cover your approach with 2 minutes of macro strikes that look like a retreat. They will correct. When they correct, I will correct that. Chow, thread the gap. If there isn't one, make one. Making gaps is what the Emperor did at the beginning. Chow mutters under his breath, and then realizes he said it aloud and straightens until his spine makes a noise. Ground, Severian asks. We go with 2 squads of armsmen, Stormer's center, 2 custodians, 4 sisters, Talon says. I will hum for him. Adjunct, the Emperor asks the governor's man. My house guard will hold the choir, he says, and he doesn't ask to go because he has learned the virtue that is trust when you can't go. They move into a silence that is full of intention. The run to the Vindicant spire is a corridor that hates consent. The walls whisper administrative kindness. Rest your joints. Check your seals. You've earned a breather. Armsmen ignore it by chewing gum and counting kills. Stormers recite the oath of calculated murder in whisper cadence. Talon's null fields make the suggestion slow like tongues in cold. Layla's strike lands a second early because she knows the crown reads perfectly and only imperfect rhythm tricks perfect clocks. Buttresses shatter. A grove of thorn antennae die like trees struck by a sudden winter. The gap opens. The Emperor takes it almost gently. They hit the spire's outer sanctum in a breath. The room is made of broken promises. Words hang in chains. Little parchment slips with ink that never dries. Each one is an order that was signed and then inverted. Armsmen flinch because some bears their captains' names. Stormers shoot them and the slips bleed black fire. The sisters hum. The fire hates them perfectly and dies. Narek Thol arrives like a sermon that only starts when you're already in the pew. He is not tall because he doesn't need to be. He wears the red of Kalth's memory and the black of Lorgar's afterthought. His Crozius is a staff with a sensor that swings when it wants to and sends smells of obedience into lungs that will later regret it. The reliquary on his chest is a little box with a slit. It is smiling politely. He speaks into the room as if he owns the right to tell air what to carry. Beloved, he says, you are weary. Let me carry your banners while you rest. Severian's jaw tightens. He will use miles of quotations, he says on a tight channel. He will present mercy as mathematics. He will borrow our phrases to gild his theft. The Emperor steps forward. He does not brandish anything. He is himself, and that is enough. He sets his right hand on the rail of a ruined lectern and leaves a fingerprint that will turn into a reliquary after the war, whether he wants it to or not. Narek Thol, he says. Thronebreaker. Narek answers with perfect courtesy. You left your seat, and so the churches learned to stand. I thank you. Your gratitude is theft in better clothes, the Emperor replies. Give me your reliquary. Narek tilts his head. I would give you my throat first, he says, smiling, and the imprimatur's slit widens as if laughing too. He moves like liturgy with teeth. The Crozius finds the custodian's block and makes it useless by erasing the intent that swung the spear. The spear still moves. It isn't a weapon anymore. It is a very fine pole. The censer breathes, and stormers hesitate and strike plates instead of necks. The reliquary opens like an eye in winter. The Emperor meets him halfway. The first clash is not metal. It is intent. Narek tries to make the Emperor's reach selfless. He tries to write sacrifice into the hinge of a shoulder and make it a habit separated from purpose. The Emperor refuses politely. He lifts his right arm and the world leans. The imprimatur spits. It is a sliver of anathema, forged from words that should never have been said and sung into blackstone until it forgot where it came from. It strikes the Emperor below the left clavicle and does not penetrate like a weapon. It enters like a suggestion. It draws a line under a sentence. It edits. The Emperor staggers. The room tilts around him for a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat, the beacon hums like it misses a note it owns. Talon's tone catches it. Her sisters take the missing note and hold it until he can find it again. The knot hand flares darker. The line of nothing down his chest finds ribs and names them in a language that has no nouns. Severian feels the wound without seeing it. It hits his paperwork. For an instant, he can't remember how to write the word will without making it lowercase. Narek's Crozius swings, quiet as an apology. It grazes the Emperor's jaw. Where it touches, intent dies. The skin goes ash white. The muscle forgets why it moves. The Emperor's right hand trembles. He steps in anyway. He chooses motion that cannot be edited because it comes from the body before the sentence. He breaks the Crozius wrist with the same small twist he used on the Black Legionary, and the break does not heal under a prayer because the Sisters' Winter is in the room and prayers have to work harder here. Narek smiles with his teeth now because he's delighted. He rams the imprimatur up under the Emperor's sternum and the slit becomes a mouth. The slit whispers, "Admit." The Emperor says, "No," in a voice that cuts parchment. He grabs the reliquary with his left hand and the wound flares in anti-light. The knot hand drinks something that should have been a promise. It becomes more knot. The Emperor takes it anyway. He pulls the reliquary off Narek's chest like a dentist pulls a tooth you have woven into your kindness. Narek hisses a phrase that could be a Primarch's name and makes it sound like a friend betraying you to save you. He drives his knee at the wound he made and finds purchase because the wound is a door to leave intention by. The Emperor's breath catches. Severian moves. He doesn't attack Narek. He attacks the censer. He fires a magnet hook that bites the chain, yanks the censer into a sister's null field, and the censer learns a useful lesson about humility at last. It goes out like a confession given to a man who has no patience for performance. The custodian finds Narek's blind side with the same inevitability his teachers drilled into his bones. He cuts. He opens meat, not dogma. Blood looks honest when it comes from a word-bearer. It remembers they were once men. Narek withdraws 3 paces in perfect order. He bows at the waist with silk manners. "You have bought yourself an hour," he says. "I bought the weapon for the next one with my blood." "You bought it with other men's souls," Severian says, almost conversational. "We will itemize your bill." The Emperor holds the imprimatur in his left hand. It writhes a little, like a worm that hates becoming a hook. He does not crush it. He turns it and looks at it as one looks at a disobedient concept. "You cannot keep that," Talon says, not angry, simply correct. "I know," he says. Narek tilts his head and listens to a voice no one else can hear. "The throne wants you," he says, with all the pity of a good liar delivering good news badly. It has a chair that matches your wound. The Emperor throws the imprimatur down. He stamps it once. It becomes a glyph that admits what it is, and lies still. Codex note: an anatom splinter cannot pierce a perpetual's flesh as metal. It enters as negation. Editing vows. The wound spreads along O's held, not veins. The room exhales. The wound does not. It creeps like a blot. It climbs his shoulder and tastes his neck. It wants his voice. Temptation arrives without horns. It comes in the shape of quiet. It offers him peace if he will agree to end arguing. It shows him a galaxy with the crown's geometry everywhere. Noctilith spires on every world. Beacon lattices caged and obedient. The warp a tamed animal chained under the Imperium's table. Voices are soft there. Ships arrive on time. Children never learn what saints are because no one needs miracles. You can make this, whispers the calm. You walk with a beacon in your bones. Tie it to 100 crowns. Set the sums right. Let choice be edited for the good. Optimization is compassion with numbers. He sees it. He sees it, and he knows he can do it. He sees men living longer under smaller skies. He sees inquisitors whose jobs are easy because sin is a syntax error. He sees sisters who never have to hum. He sees no demons because there is no door. He sees silhouettes of men who are not men anymore, because a world without prayer makes you forget what you lack. Talon's note finds him. It is thin and bold. It is not comfort. It is the hand on the back of a neck when you are about to stand and must. Look, she doesn't say, because she does not speak. Remember why you refused the throne. You did not refuse pain. You refused ease. He refuses ease again. No, he says to the world that has a future built into it. The warp is not a plumbing problem. Men are not spreadsheets. An empire of quiet is a mausoleum. The price arrives on schedule. The wound climbs his jaw. For 3 heartbeats, half his tongue forgets a word that once meant we. He has to pick it up and put it back into his mouth by remembering a field of wheat no one else remembers. The room around him registers the refusal. The crown's song picks up a complicated harmony to punish his righteousness. Narek smiles with honest sadness because he respects a man who can say no to a good lie. Cost, Talon says, because she owes the tally to the truth. A week, he answers, and the number makes 3 armsmen flinch because it is too big to be a day tax and too small to be eternity. The sacred sign arrives as a bruise of light across the beacon. It is not rescue. It is a handprint the size of terror. It is a flare that makes the nave in the basilica shiver and the choir vault whine. It is a sigil that Sabatine's adjutant does not have in his books, because you don't print that symbol where men can touch it. Malcador's echo walks through the beacon for a single step. No voice, no wink, no kindly lecture, just pressure, just the weight of a choice held too long without sleep. Severian feels it as a memory you shouldn't own, a room of quiet on terror, a game with black and white stones, a man sighing like a library remembering it used to be a forest. He blinks and the echo is gone. On the fleet, Layla sees the same bruise on lenses that do not pick up ghosts. Signal, she asks Chow, not trusting his answer and needing it anyway. Not a signal, Chow says, and tries not to cry. And attention, Terra looked. Then Terra expects, Layla mutters, and the word feels like a debt she can't pay with guns. The crown shudders. The Vindicant spire cracks along lines no engineer drew. Narek retreats with a bow and a smile and a little smear of his own blood on his lip that he licks away slowly to make it a sacrament. We will speak at the throne, he says, a promise or a threat, and vanishes into a door that isn't a door unless you hate doors. The aftermath takes a shape that will bruise later. Stormers carry men who cannot remember their names until someone says them. Armsmen plant charges on the spire's route table, fold the map and burn it, all in one motion. The sisters stop humming after 37 minutes, because if they hum for 38, their voices will never come back. Severian kneels beside the Emperor. He does not touch him. He raises 2 fingers as if to make a sign, and then puts them back down because he has no license to make that sign here. "You will go to Terra," he says, and it is not a question. "Yes," the Emperor answers. "The Senate, the custodians, those who think they know what the throne is, those who have made a throne of me in their minds. You will be judged," Severian says, "because someone has to say it." "I will be weighed," the Emperor replies. "Not by men alone." Severian nods once, not to the man or the myth, but to the inevitability of law when you have made yourself law for too long. "We will hold Hydrafor," he says. "We will hold while you go." Layla's voice comes in like a rung on a ladder they built together. "We can hold for 6 if the beacon gives me 3 of those hours at full pulse," she says. "We can hold for 10 if someone cuts the last of the crown's macro emplacements. We can hold for longer if the ugly thing that calls itself a basilica dies slower. We can't hold forever. Forever is not your task," the Emperor says. "You must hold until truth arrives." "Truth?" Sabatine's adjutant asks, because he has had enough poetry for one war. "Relief fleets," Severian translates. "Names with dates, ships with hulls, not hope." "Hides Minor?" the adjutant asks, and he is surprised that he cares about a rock that used to be just the sky's punctuation. "It will heal wrong," Talon says, "but it will heal." The Emperor stands. The wound pulls at his mouth like a man trying to write with the wrong hand. He breathes as if the air gave him permission. He turns toward the basilica without moving. The beacon hears him. Lanes thicken. Somewhere very far away, a ship that has been lost so long it forgot why it left port lifts its head and turns. "We go," he says, and Severian hears where that road ends, because the man said Terra without saying it. The custodian steps closer, spear angled as if his charge weighs more than gold and less than everything. "Escort," he says simply. "And acquire," the Emperor replies, looking at Talon. She nods once. "We will walk in your quiet," she says. Layla's laugh is smaller than before, but more honest. "I'll carve you a corridor," she says. "Don't make me keep it open alone." Sabatine's adjutant squares up as if he can stand on a table and become a city. "We will talk to our people," he says. "We will tell them the beacon is not a god and must be fed with toil, not people. We will tell them the choir's door stays shut, even if their names are on the other side. We will tell them that if anyone orders them to rest in a fight, they should spit on the order and shoot whoever brought it." Severian almost smiles. "Good doctrine," he says dryly. "We'll edit it later." They leave the spire in a disciplined ruin. Charges go off in a syncopation that will later be choreographed as a ritual and taught to shock troops who will never see Hides Minor. The crown's core shrinks by another mean fraction. The beacon hums a rib that wasn't there before. The tear over Hydrafor is still a wound, but its edges aren't as eager. Back at the basilica, the nave is a quiet that a saint would be careful around. The stained glass is tarped, the roof is patched with prayer and sheet metal. Men sleep against pillars with helmets as pillows. A sister sits on the altar step and stares at her hands, as if remembering that they are hands and not instruments. The Emperor steps into the center of the nave. The not hand is a hole to the elbow now. The wound on his chest writes itself in neat lines, a clerk doing tidy work. He lifts his chin and looks toward a place that isn't here. "Terra," he says. The word is a vow and a map, and a question you ask a father. The beacon answers by changing tone. It finds a pitch that is old and hard, a note that used to live in cathedrals when men had more stone than certainty. It stretches that note across the segmentum like a bridge made of good decisions. It stings. Sabatine arrives with eyes that have learned new colors. She has blood on her sleeves that is not hers and a sash that used to be white. My city will hold, she says. She is telling the truth on a day when truth is expensive. The Emperor nods. Your city will be a proverb, he says, for bad and for good. Make it one men can live under. She bows without bending her knees because bending them would make it worship. As you command, she says, and doesn't try to make the phrase mean less than it does. Severian touches the case where the tetrarch marks wriggle against pins. We will need names on terror, he says. We will need to say what we did here without becoming poets. I will need to be insolent in a room that punishes insolence. Be insolent, the Emperor says. But count. I always count, Severian replies, and the words feel like a sin he gets to keep. The sacred sign ripples a second time. It is not a bruise this time. It is a line. It runs through the basilica and points toward the sky. It smells like ozone and old parchment. It says nothing. It says, if you come, do not come alone. The mandate is clear. The corruption lingers. The decision is made. The Emperor breathes in Hydrophor's dust and incense and sweat. The wound on his chest bites like a scribe whose hand is cramped. He looks at the gate the custodians are cutting with light and math. He looks at Talon, at Layla's mark on a column, at Severian's case of mouths, at Raz asleep with his rifle under his cheek. You will see the throne, he says to no one and to all of them. It will see you. He turns towards the opening gate and steps, and the beacon goes with him like a shadow that chose its man rather than being assigned. Hydrophor recedes, a bruised jewel under a wounded sky. The beacon's pulse stretches into a path thin as a wire and strong as a vow. Dropships nestle inside a custodian barge whose hull wears scripture as armor. The Sisters of Silence take the forward chapel and make it a medicae by humming the air into steadiness. The Emperor stands in that winter and lets the cold bite the edges of the wound that edits his chest. A Medici priest in red and bone asks permission to see what no augur should. The Emperor nods. The priest's mechadendrites move like thoughtful spiders. They find nothing to stitch. They print out a pict of a sentence with a missing clause and do not understand why a man's body looks like grammar. Non-anatomical lesion, the priest murmurs. Semantic channel. Prognosis. Progressive unless counter-uttered. He looks up, ashamed of the poverty of his craft. You have named it, the Emperor says. That is craft enough. Severian watches from the threshold, helmet under his arm, coat torn. Case of captured stamps clipped to his belt, like trophies made of arguments. If you let the wound do its doctrine, he says, it will write you into a chair. It has already tried, the Emperor answers, and his mouth makes a brief shape that could be humor if you knew him long enough to forgive it. Talon stands near the altar niche, helm off, eyes like flint that keeps its warmth to itself. Dogma will ask for you to stop paying, she says. Cost will ask for you to pay until nothing is left. The chapel suggests pay where it makes room for others to pay rightly. Severian glances at her. You said that like a confession. Like a calculus, Talon replies. We are not permitted confessions. The barge cuts a corridor through a warp that smells faintly of iron and rain, despite the scrubbers. The beacon leashes a rift and makes it behave. Outside the viewports, colors crawl that have never learned names. Inside, the custodians polish their work like monks readying relics, and the stormtroopers sleep in the brief professional way of men who expect to be woken by discipline or disaster, whichever arrives first. A mentor walks in the form of an old custodian, whose aura might bears more careful repairs than the others. He leans his spear against the chapel wall and bows his head to the sisters' quiet. "When I first took the oath," he says to the Emperor, "I thought cost and dogma were the same word." "They were for a time," the Emperor says. "They are not now," the custodian replies without accusation. "You refused a throne and we were not told how to stand without your weight. Stand," the Emperor says, gentle. "And when your legs shake, make the shaking a signal, not a shame." The custodian smiles with his eyes. "I will make a drill for that," he says. The barge shivers. The beacon's tone lurches and catches. The sister's hum dips, corrects, grows harder, like a blade that remembered it is a tool. Chow's voice appears in the chapel as if it had the right interference, interdiction geometry. It's not a crown. It's us. The corridor in front of the barge is suddenly a hall of gold. It is not the imperial palace, but it knows the lines. Pillars grow like sermons. Reliefs of victories that haven't happened yet gaze down with the confidence of curated memory. A figure approaches down the hall, walking like a decision. It wears him. It is not an illusion meant to flatter. It is a mirror that has learned to argue. Golden skin, eyes like long plans. On its brow, not a corona, but a circlet of black vows, each a ring of noctilith turned inward. Its left hand is whole. Its right holds a scepter shaped like a fraction. Stormers raise weapons. The sisters' fields fuss at the air, find perches, and make the hall shine go matte. "I am the autarch of the paled crown," the copy says, voice ash-soft. "I am the version of you who accepted optimization as mercy. I am the emperor who stopped letting men be inefficient and started saving them on time." Severian laughs once because terror sometimes wears mirth like a talisman. "Mirror foe," he says on a tight channel. Optimization of his flaw. He is our argument wearing his face. The autarch inclines its head, amused by accurate labeling. "Come home," it says to the Emperor. "Take the seat that is a system. We will end hell the way we end hunger, by rationing want. We will strap a crown to every star and call that daylight." The Emperor steps forward and feels the wound twitch in recognition. The autarch's left hand hole is a promise the edit would like to keep. He does not reach. "You offer a kindness that weighs like chains," he says. "You will keep children safe until they learn to be quiet for you." "I will keep them alive," the autarch says. "They can learn whatever they like under a sky that does not try to eat them." Severian's fingers find the case on his belt. He could pin another mouth. He could learn this thing's signature and add it to his doctrine box. He does not move. He listens because he needs to know how his own sin talks. "Show your proof," Talon says. And she says it because it is the one sentence all sisters are permitted. The hall becomes a star map. Lines of pale gold connect worlds like veins. On each, a small crown blooms, tamed, chained to a beacon node that looks like a saint's icon with a plug. Ships run on time. Wars peter out for lack of bad roads. Inquisitors become auditors. The Astartes become parade. The sisters go out of work. The dead per capita plummet, the autarch says. The psychically gifted live and are tended, not burned. No one sings into the void because the void has been taught to hum along. The light is portable. The iconoclasts starve. The ruinous powers go cold like wolves in a famine. Men live long enough to become something calmer than men. Severian wants to argue and finds himself silent. Layla's voice does not come through the channel, and he realizes, with a small grief that feels like pride, that he already knows her answer and does not need to hear it. The Emperor closes his right hand until the knuckles go white. The left remains a problem. He looks at a map that is so plausible. A general could love it until he died of pleasure. He thinks of Hydrafer's choir vault. He thinks of Ras refusing to take 2 steps. He thinks of Talon's voice holding a note that hurts. "No," he says. "You save men from suffering by removing the choice that makes them men. You make me a machine that writes happy endings no one earned." "I make you efficient," the autarch replies, not insulted. "I edit your cost to 0. "You edit me to 0, he answers, and steps in. The high concept clash is brief, because long arguments are how both would win. The autarch tries to edit lanes to make the corridor decide it is a throne room. The sisters fix the channel's grammar with null. The Emperor reaches into his wound and pulls a handful of the nothing that has been eating him. He throws it like a net. It lands on the autarch and goes through it and finds the black Vow circlet. The circlet eats it and loves it. The autarch smiles. It reaches with its whole left hand toward the Emperor's throat. "Consent," it says kindly. The chapel flares. It is not Malcador's echo. It is older and more domestic. It is a kitchen prayer carried by 10,000 forgotten grandmothers who burned bread and taught songs anyway. It is a wax stub candle in a shelter under a bombardment. It is the hand of a nameless saint who never left her street. It writes itself across the corridor in the sisters' pitch. It says, "Not here." The autarch recoils. It is optimized against gods and ideologies, not against the small divine that happens when a city decides to stand. The corridor shakes itself like an offended dog. The beacon burns a line through the autarch's map and makes a door. "Reach the throne," says a voice that belongs to a man who is not here, and a machine that is tired, and a city that has passed an exam. The autarch steps backward into his certainty, and the certainty folds around him like a cloak. He leaves a taste of ash and inevitability. He leaves a promise to meet again in a room built for decisions. The barge falls into open corridor, and savant bells ring along its spine as if embarrassed to have been silent. Chow sobs once off-ox and pretends he sneezed. The sisters keep humming as if nothing happened, which is their art. Severian exhales and tastes the thin dryness of fear he didn't notice drinking. "Mirror," he says quietly. "We should teach men how to argue with that before it arrives in their dreams. Write your catechism," the Emperor says, and the Medici priest at the back, who has never been asked to add to doctrine, bows so fast he bumps a relic case. Transit from there is uneventful in the way a midnight walk through a dangerous neighborhood is uneventful when you move like a man who knows every dog by name. The beacon draws a straightness out of crooked space. The wound gnaws. The barge's chapel becomes a medici again, then a refectory, then a debating hall with no chairs. They come to the system of soul like men entering the house they built and left during a storm. Voidworks bloom around terror like thorns around a rose that decided to defend itself. Rings of stone and fire, monitors as big as cities. The palace itself is a continent of spires welded to mountain and myth. Guns the size of regrets watch the sky. A column of golden ships rises from the cradle like a wall that learned to walk. They are custodian flagships, and they show no joy at recognizing kin. They show competence. Their void shields whisper hymns in a dialect that predates memory. Freighters carrying food for 1 billion brush past with the silent arrogance of supply. Identity, a voice asks from everywhere and nowhere, and Severian feels himself audited down to the number of his teeth. Name sufficient, the Emperor says, and this time he is looked at with appropriate suspicion. Names are not keys, the everywhere voice replies, politely. Then the key is this, the Emperor says, and he lets the beacon's geometry unfold like a hand that remembers it used to hold children. He shows the lattice. He shows the cost. He shows Hyde's miner's crown cracked, and Idra 4's choir shut and Ra's holding still at one step. He shows the autarch and the refusal. Silence answers. Silence arms. Silence opens a door the size of an oath. They descend through atmosphere that tastes like incense burned in an engine. The palace grows until the eye forgets how to measure. The landing field is not a field. It is a nave open to the open air, sunlight falling in ribs of gold. A gallery of statues of men who will exist later stands with dignity they will one day earn. A line of custodians waits, and each looks like a reason no one should run. Between the lines, a corridor of blanks. The Quietus choir wears no heraldry. They are women and men with faces as calm as coins. Their null fields are braided into a carpet that murmurs don't with gentle insistence. Talon steps into their presence and inclines her head. Professional respect, not affection. They walk. The air is loud with quiet. The banners hang like sermons that know how to listen. The gates of the Sanctum Imperialis do not open because they were never closed in the way men think doors are closed. They recede like an idea-making room. Within, an audience that speaks without mouths. The High Lords are present as silhouettes behind lattice and light. Seneschal, Master of the Administratum. Grand Provost, Master of the Fleet. Ecclesiarch's chair empty but warm. More pressure than persons. The throne itself is a machine wound around a hole of light. It is an oracle backed into a corner by necessity and turned into furniture. It hums like a choice that will not stop. The emperor stands at the foot of the dais and does not climb. He looks at the throne as one looks at a knife you have used. He looks at the men behind the lattice as one looks at a debt collector you respect enough to argue with. No one speaks for 3 breaths. Then the palace speaks. Not words. A pressure that tightens behind the eyes. A taste like copper prayers. A milky light that comes from nowhere and lands on the wound that edits him. And the wound does not like it. Consent, the palace asks without asking. Are you willing to be weighed by what you taught us to be? Yes, he says. Consent. It breathes at Severian. Yes, he says, surprising himself with how quickly the word comes. Consent. It brushes at Talon. Yes, she says, because a sister's power lives where consent does not. And the paradox is prayer. The exchange is not vox. It is a book you hold together and turn pages at the same time without fighting over the corners. It shows him the siege that was not, where Malcador burns on a throne that was meant for a god and holds a webway gate shut with sleep and spite. It shows him the throne's machine spirit, a creature made of intent and ductwork, fed by oaths ground to flour. It shows him the Senate learning to argue in the vacuum your refusal made and loving it too much. We are an altar, the palace admits. We are a tool that ate its purpose and kept the taste. He shows it Hydrofer and the crown, the Tetrarch's stamp, the mirror autarch's map. He shows it that choice can survive in a city that holds its choir shut with men who intend to live again. He shows it that vows can be fuel without becoming food. We are tired, the palace confesses. We are not omniscient. We are an answer that forgot to be a question. We will ask, he says. We will stand without sitting. We will carry the light. We will not put children in engines. The throne's hum deepens. Around it, the custodians shift, almost imperceptibly, like trees acknowledging wind. Behind lattice, one silhouette leans forward and another leans back, balancing. A voice enters the room that belongs to a woman who has never lost an argument. She intended to win. You refused your chain, says the master of the administratum. Now you request license to carry it in your hand and walk around the empire tapping men with it. Explain why we should not call that caprice. Severian steps forward because insolence must be rationed and this is his day to spend it. Because the chain is his wound, he says. Because if you lock him into your furniture, the wound will eat him to the letter, and you will have a chair with a man's shape and no man. Because on hides minor and hydropher and 1,000 places like them, a moving light will save ships that a fixed light cannot reach. The Grand Provost silhouette turns slightly, and if he errs, then I will write it down, Severian says, and I will bring it here, and you will decide whether his errand is worth his error. The ecclesiarch's chair does not speak, which is mercy. The master of the fleet says, "What do you demand then, emperor who refused? Not a throne, presumably. Mandate," he says. "Terms, witnesses, acquire, limits. Speak them," says the seneschal, with the weariness of a man who finds himself in a meeting that will be remembered. He speaks without drama. "I will carry the beacon where it must be carried. I will not sit on your throne. I will anchor to choirs of blanks and oath-bound men, and will pay the cost in days, and in what you will measure that I cannot. I will take fleets where your lanes have failed. I will hunt crowns and pull them down. I will build small fires that can survive without me. I will endure judgment, periodic and final." "And your limits?" the master asks, too quickly. He lays them out like tools. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. The pale beacon can sustain a stable corridor for 9 contiguous hours at full pulse, before the lattice begins to eat its own oaths. Past 6, blank choirs must rotate, or their fields invert at the edges. Blackstone structures trained to contempt reduce lattice efficiency by 1/3 within 100 kilometers, and by half if keyed to an anatame signature. Such zones require sisters within 5 meters to keep music honest. Anatame edits propagate along vows made in haste. Oaths must be witnessed and slow to resist contagion. The autarch's optimization maps can only be burned by local consent. Cities that do not agree cannot be saved against themselves without teaching the crown new tricks. And the beacon's cost remains. It taxes the bearer in days that do not come back. If the lattice consumes a month in a day, the bearer must stand down or be unmade into a story too useful to resist. "You will submit to command," the master of the administratum says, each word clipped, a tally mark. "I will submit to purpose," he answers. "Command that serves it will feel like a hand on my shoulder. Command that does not will feel like weather I endure. You will call me when you need a storm. I will come when men cannot make one." "Arrogant," a silhouette says lightly. "Necessary," Tyler replies, the single word heavy with a sister's vocabulary of approvals. The throne hums again, different this time. It shows him a memory he did not expect. Himself, before men had invented crowns, walking with tribes through a valley after a flood, carrying a child on his shoulders because he was the tallest and the water was cold. It whispers in his pulse. The tallest carries, not always, not forever, long enough. His left not hand tightens. The wound listens to the palace like a rival and quiets. It does not retreat. It learns a boundary. "You will be judged again," the seneschal says. "Not only by us, by the thing you left and the thing you bring." "I know," he says. "Then we accept the argument," the master of the fleet decides, because ships like clear words. "You will go, you will cut, you will leave room for us to govern. You will send back doctrine instead of legends." The Golden Guards turn slightly so that the corridor towards the gates becomes a vector and not a hallway. The Quietus choir takes one precise step backward as a group, not rejection, accommodation. The palace relaxes by a fraction you could measure in the way the air tastes. A sign arrives, not bruise or line, a soft bell. Somewhere in the palace, a kitchen timer goes off and a woman takes bread out of an oven. Somewhere in Hydrofer, a choir mistress stops bleeding from her eyes and speaks her own name. Somewhere on Hyde's Minor, a pylon decides to die 1 hour earlier than it intended. This is the scale on which sacred signs come. Not trumpets. Bread. Reach the throne, the palace says one last time. Softer. And this time the phrase does not mean sit. It means visit when the work changes shape. He bows his head very slightly. He turns. Severian pivots beside him, jaw set in the way of a man who plans to displease many people for the right reasons. Talon lifts her chin, and the sisters answer with a tone that is almost kind. Outside, Terra's sky is a weight held up by engineering and faith. The barge waits with engines that pray better after their pilgrimage. The beacon hums in his bones and promises nothing except the road. They pass the statues again. They look less confident. That is good. A statue that knows a war has started does not strut. As they rise, Severian catches the Emperor's profile and the shadow that has become his left forearm. "You paid," he says. "Not a question." "I will pay more," the Emperor replies. "We will count," Severian says, "and make that counting a law." Talon looks toward the horizon, where the palace's silhouette cuts the sun like a blade. "Dogma will chase you," she says. "Cost will chase you. We will walk between them and make a bridge." The Emperor nods once. "We will make a bridge of men who choose," he says. They climb into the sky that made him. The beacon opens a lane like a slit of winter through summer. Behind them, the palace breathes, not easier, but cleaner. Ahead, the map fills with tasks that used to be legends and are now jobs. On the barge's deck, Ras, who is permitted to come because he has the kind of luck doctrine loves to pretend is merit, sits very still and practices taking one step. Just one. He smiles without showing his teeth because, for now, that is victory enough. The corridor home is star-thin and song-tight. The beacon hums inside the hull like a second heart. Men speak softly, as if a loud word might scuff the path. The Emperor stands at the forward rail and watches the lane he drew for himself. White as breath on obsidian, straight as a vow no one wants to break. The choice arrives without ceremony. It begins as a pressure in the chapel's nave. A clean hand on the back of the neck. Then the forward bulkhead becomes a window with 3 panes, and the panes start to breathe. Sisters glance up and keep humming. Stormers straighten because the air feels like inspection. Severian folds his arms slowly. He does not bow. He refuses to look away. The first pane shows a road paved with memory. It is terror as it would have been. A throne filled by a body that is not quite dead. A god machine fed by prayers and an empire fed by that machine. The room smells like incense and copper and the clean ache of obedience. Custodians stand like trees that know winter and do not fear it. The throne hums and men live under its hum and call that living enough. The second pane shows a man walking alone. His feet touch worlds that forget they were sick when he leaves. He is not on charts. He is rumor and relief, paradox and prophecy. He moves like a cure that doesn't ask permission. He lights cities with his hands and then vanishes like weather. The map behind him is bright and cracked. Every bright is a schism. The third pane shows a procession. Choirs of blanks carry a geometry through space like pallbearers who refuse to bury their charge. Fleets fall in around it by choice and by order at once. The beacon rides inside a framework of oaths that are slow and careful. It touches worlds and demands nothing except work. It bleeds days and receives doctrine. It stands in courts. It does not love and accepts questions from men who are trying to be honest. A voice that is not voice fills the chapel. It is the palace and the city and the small saints who bake bread. It is the law spoken gently. 3, it says, and the word means more than counting. Severian speaks first, because he has earned the risk. Return, he says, nodding at the first pane, gives us stability. It costs us a species' future curiosity. Free agent gives us miracles and then a famine of trust. Sanctioned servant gives us procedure and pain and enough light to teach children where the switch is. Layla's face flickers on a hololith bubble near the nave, patched in through a channel Chow shouldn't have been able to find. From the fleet, she says, return gives me timetables and a final day where I cannot imagine new ones. Free agent gives me a sky I can't coordinate. Sanctioned servant gives me a lane. I can work with a lane. Talon's voice is iron under snow. Return gives dogma a gravity well. We will orbit until we rust. Free agent gives cost without counsel. We will hum ourselves hoarse for a legend. Sanctioned servant gives consent a room and cost a ledger. We will stand where standing helps. The Emperor listens to his people, and to the room, and to the wound in his chest. He looks most at the first pane. He lets himself want it. The quiet, the ease. He tastes the second pane and feels his bones stir for the walk. The free line drawn under the word no one gets to edit but him. Then he watches the third pane until the part of him that hates meetings remembers why he made men and not statues. He steps forward. The panes shiver. He raises his right hand and touches the third. It does not go warm. It goes heavy. I choose the chain that moves, he says. I choose rules with names. I choose witnesses. I choose a mandate that can be repealed by men who can count. The first pane goes out without drama. The second dims like a bar closing. The third brightens to the color of hard work. The blood price makes itself known. His left arm, already a shadow to the elbow, thrums once, as if the edit was surprised to lose, then sulks its way into obedience. The wound along his chest writes one more neat line and stops for now. He trembles, as if someone had lifted a weight off him that he had grown used to wearing to stay upright. Terms, Severian says immediately, because victory is when you start writing. Speak them, the Emperor replies. Boundaries, Severian says, counting on his fingers and naming each as law. No sacrificial tithe. The beacon feeds on oath and song and nothing else. Choirs must be volunteers. Oaths must be witnessed and slow. No oath taken in fear powers a lattice. Every deployment is logged and audited with location, duration, and cost in days. You submit to recall for judgment every 100 days or after any act that changes law. You do not intervene in internal governance unless it touches lanes, beacons, or existential threats. You do not found a cult. Your image is not a tax. Your orders carry paradox so they can be tested. Your authority ends where consent begins. Talon adds, quiet and exact. We add our clause. Any sister may refuse to anchor if the room stinks of compulsion. If compulsion is smelled, the beacon collapses by design. Layla's voice threads through. Operational. You will never ask a fleet to burn out his tubes for your miracle if a retreat saves the men and the lanes. If you need a storm, tell me how long to hold the umbrella. The custodian mentor inclines his head. We define witness, he says. A custodian stands where your foot falls and says yes or no with his eyes. His no binds you into room and argument until we decide. The Emperor nods to each. Accepted, he says without bargaining. He looks up. And my clause, mercy is not treason. Any man who lays down his gun when told to stand down will be weighed as a man, not as an error. Any child touched by the warp is a child first. We will bind what we can and burn what we must, but we will say their names before and after. The chapel breathes, as if someone opened a window on a hot day. Severian writes with his eyes. Talon's mouth doesn't move, but agreement lives in the angle of her helm. Layla, somewhere under a sky of guns, tips an invisible hat. Witness, the palace says gently, and the corridor fills with the sense of law that is not men alone. The mandate sets like a metal cooled right. Then the ship groans because a promise has mass. The beacon's geometry arcs over the Emperor's shoulders like a mantle and sinks into the gold he wears. New sigils burn and stay, an aquila stripped to line and function, crossed by the white rib of a moving lane, circled by a thin band of null runes that mean no and yes together. The armor does not glow, it accepts. Sabatine's adjutant, on a channel patched through by stubborn civic prayer, inhales like a man seeing a flag he will spend his life explaining. We will print that, he says, shaky and proud. We will teach our children that shape. The transformation is not fireworks. It is an alignment. He stands a little differently. The barge feels it under its feet, the way a horse feels a rider sit back into a seat that fits. The lane thickens. It is time. They break out of transit into Hydrophor's wound and find the sky less hungry than when they left. The crown on Hyde's Minor is a broken ring, its pylons like dead teeth. Macro batteries speak with a voice that has learned grammar. Layla's fleet looks battered and efficient and mean in the way men get when they refuse to be tired while you watch. Report, she says before Chow can, because she trusts what she sees but must still obey the ritual of hearing it. Outer platforms held, Chow says, voice sandpaper. Manufactorum 12 is ours again. The drains are just drains. The choir vault door is a door and not a suggestion. The ugly basilica went to pieces like it heard a joke and didn't like it. Losses, Layla adds, because respect counts corpses out loud. 15% fleet effective, Chow answers. 42% city hurt. Survivable if we keep a hospital's worth of blood on tap for a month. Acceptable, Layla says softly, which in her mouth means deforming, and we will remember them. The Emperor does not give a speech to the sky. He gives orders. We finish the crown, he says. We clean the lanes. We write a drill for men, will not be me. We send the doctrine and the mouths and the map to Terra. And then, Severian asks, because Act 5 is choice, and choice binds you to next. He looks at the lane only he can see, which runs not to Terra now, but away from Hydrophor toward worlds whose names are not on charts, and whose prayers never made it into the compilations. Then we go where the light is thin, he says. The last fight over Hyde's Minor is short and speaks only to stubbornness. The crown's remaining pylons try to learn faster than men can act. They fail because men in a room with witnesses and boundaries and consent move quicker than a thing that relies on stolen signatures. Charges walk with careful feet. Sisters hum without injury. Custodians guard without thinking they are the point. Armsmen shoot like men who found out skill is love. The structure collapses with relief rather than drama, as if glad to be done telling lies. In the basilica, Jessa the scribe weeps on her ledgers, because the choir mistress opens her eyes and says her own name and says Jessa's too. Sabatine stands on the cathedral steps with a houseguard sergeant, whose bandage is a promotion, and tells a crowd that their city lived because they did not open all doors when asked politely by the wrong voice. Chow falls asleep in his chair for 4 minutes and dreams of lines becoming roads. Ras, who did not take 2 steps, stands beside a sister at the foot of the nave and does not say anything because he has nothing to add to the hum. He holds 1 step in his body like a prayer. The Emperor walks the basilica 1 more time. He puts his right hand on a column that will be a relic in 3 days. He does not look at his left, because looking at it does nothing and looking away does nothing. Only work changes it. He turns to Severian. The 3 paths told me a truth I already knew, he says. Now tell me a lie I am likely to believe. Severian smiles with the small edge you keep for men who won't forget you tried to help. That we can do this without becoming like the thing we fought, he says. The lie is that we will never be tempted to be efficient at the cost of consent. Then we will write that on the wall, the Emperor replies, and we will make men read it before they receive their weapons. Talon steps close enough that he could feel her field if she let him. We will follow you until you ask us to step where consent cannot go, she says. Then we will refuse, and that refusal will keep you honest. Good, he says, and for a heartbeat the word has warmth like broth. The fleet turns outward. Relief convoys, misfit and magnificent, ride in on lanes that did not exist yesterday. A rogue trader with more charm than scruples bows to the beacon's geometry and makes a deal with himself to be better because it pays. A pilgrim ship sings off-key and gets corrected gently by a tug crew who hate singing but love pilots. He leaves a detachment, not troops he can't spare. Doctrine, a binder of drills with dates and signatures. A casket of mouths, captured tetrarch stamps, to teach machines what not to listen to. A sister's note for choirs, how to smell compulsion. A letter for Sabatine, merciless and kind, detailing the price of rebuilding with lanes as spine rather than alibi. He leaves Raz with a handshake because rituals matter. 2, the Emperor says. Raz nods, eyes bright and dry. 2, he answers. They depart. The lane opens as if pleased. The beacon hums and bites. The wound nips his breath once and then settles into a presence he can hate without letting it pick the topic of conversation. The barge sets a practical course for a system no one in the room has ever visited, whose distress calls got lost in the static decades ago. They aim for a world with a tower built of wrong blackstone, and a town that calls the wrong god hope. They aim for a cluster where navigators stop being born. They aim for a place where a small saint is tired of being small. The new mandate lives on the ship like a law that knows why it exists. Men obey it because it works. Men argue with it because it asks them to. Men enforce it because it saves people they will never meet. On the way out, the autarch of the Pearled Crown appears one more time. Not in a corridor, not in a chapel, in the viewport, reflected in the curve of the glass, his left hand still whole and his crown still made of tidy black vows. You are inefficient, he murmurs, regretful as a former protege watching a beloved teacher choose art over scale. You will save fewer. We will save freer, the Emperor answers, and the autarch smiles the way you smile at a poet who quoted a line that will cost a city. He fades, promise deferred. Dark Apostle Narek Thor stands in a chamber that is a church inside a hull and traces a circle around a hole, shaped like a relic he wants back. He writes a letter he intends to read at the foot of a throne one day. He bleeds into a bowl and thinks about how to teach men to love edits. Far away, in a tomb too quiet to be honest, artisans who sculpt black stone with katana-sharp memory tilt their heads. They do not love that men have learned to make geometry confess itself. They accrete a plan with the patience of minerals. On Terra, a clerk writes a new line into a ledger. She does not know that the line will be quoted in cathedrals. She does not care. She makes the handwriting neat. On Hydrafor, Layla stands at a viewport with a cup of something too strong and watches tugboats dance. Hold it together, she tells her bridge without turning, and the bridge does, because it can. Sabatine scolds a boy for climbing on a statue, and then laughs, and then orders the statue moved, because it's in the wrong place, for a city that burned and learned. Sister Mistress Nahum hums to herself, not a null tone, a lullaby. Chow puts his head down for 6 minutes and dreams of a map with fewer lies. Severian drafts the first volume of the Beacon Mandates, plain as bread, with an appendix for dissent that dares an inquisitor to use it. He writes a page titled "How to Disagree with a Useful Myth Without Making a New One," and laughs because it's mostly blank and will be for years. Talon stands at the prow and watches space like an ocean with predators you respect. She says nothing for an hour. Then she says, to the man beside her who is counting quietly with his lips, "Sing." He does, soft and off-key, and no one laughs. The barge finds its first new darkness and makes a door. The door opens. He steps through, wearing a symbol that is an aquila cut to bone crossed by a lane and circled with thin negation, the sign of an empire that learned to move. The room on the other side smells like a shrine that forgot it used to be a hospital. Men look up. Some reach for guns. Some reach for their children. He does not tell them to bow. He says, "Work." It begins again. The epilogue walks the galaxy in 12 short breaths. A frontier agri-world where winters lasted too long opens its silo because a convoy arrives by a road only faith made. A girl with grease and flour on her face salutes her sister in dull steel and is gently corrected. We don't do that here. We bake bread. A forge in a void station catches fire and doesn't kill anyone because a captain on a cutter recognizes a stamp that lied to him once and throws it away without asking permission. He will get yelled at later by a man who loves forms. He will still have his crew. A chapter on the edge of honor and hunger sees a lane and does not charge down it without instruction. They wait for a voice that says, "Consent, then go." It is the hardest thing they have done in a century. It saves worlds because it teaches a habit. The word-bearers gather her in a temple built upside down and read a liturgy written in errata. Narek Tol writes a new line. "Beware those who say mercy with a ledger." He means Severian. He has earned his hatred. The autarch of the piled crowns sits at a desk made of victories and drafts a map. He puts little crowns on stars with his left hand flawless. He erases cities that won't take the edit. He smiles with the fatigue of a god who learns scaling. On Terra, the palace hums a hair lower. The throne is not empty. It is unoccupied. It does not like the difference. It tolerates it. A kitchen bells rings again. Bread again. Hydrophore puts out a notice. Singers wanted. Tone optional. Humility required. The basilica's nave smells like wax and sweat and dignity. Sabatine writes a tax code that does not mention the emperor's face. Layla names a new class of tug after a woman who drowned in a dock saving a child. Chow retires a prayer he never liked and keeps another he never thought he would. Ra stands under a clean sky and listens to the way air feels when nothing is coming apart. He takes 2 steps for the joy of it and then laughs without guilt. He will tell the story badly to a child in 10 years who will still learn the lesson he needs to learn. A nameless saint lights a candle in a hallway that never had light and smiles at how little the flame is and how much of the dark it refuses. She does not know the emperor. She is certain he does not know her. She is wrong, and he is glad about that. The last image is a map. Stars like pins, lanes like threads. In the corner of the map, a little emblem new this year. An aquila reduced to line, a white rib drawn over it, a thin ring of negation. On a distant world with an ugly sky, a child sees that symbol on a crate of antibiotics and decides that when she is grown, she will fly ships on roads that didn't exist when she was born. She tells her brother the name of the sign because the adults haven't agreed on one yet. "The moving light," she whispers, proud of naming a thing that deserves names. Ships answer it.